and I was like, this is inappropriate. I'm going to tell it on the internet.
Put a finger down.
Put a finger down.
Put a finger down.
Exploiting my life for 4 years, there is a cost.
Part 37, who the fuck did I marry?
I'm Jess. I'm Alexa.
Hi, my name is Emily.
And I brought gummy clusters.
We constantly want to blame the people that are posting, and we want to blame the social media platform, but we don't want to take accountability, not to like completely excuse them.
Bitch, what I was trying to say is this situation got me so wet and so dry at the same time. Exactly.
What's up, bitches? Welcome back to another episode of So Wet, So Dry. I'm one of your hosts, Fiji, like the island, like the water. I love to intellectualize everything, and I work in social media and marketing.
And I'm your other host, Autumn, like the season. This is the year I'm finally going to get a tattoo on my body, and I work in entertainment. If you guys are new here, tuning in for the very first time, what we do on So Wet, So Dry is we explore duality through deep diving topics all about relationships, sex, personal identity, all where internet trends and reality collide. We would love to have you guys join our community. We post polls on our Instagram story every single week for the episodes that we're doing and give y'all an opportunity to submit a story, question, advice, anything. So make sure you're following us on Instagram to be a part of that at So Wet, So Dry. The O's are zeros. And whatever you guys are doing right now, whatever platform you're on, please just remember to subscribe or follow us. It takes 2 seconds and it helps us a lot. You can like the video, comment, share it with a friend, bitch. You can rate us on Spotify, whatever you want. We are so close to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube, and we really want to hit that by let's set a goal like November, December. So please subscribe on YouTube, even if you're listening on another platform. And yeah, we'll make it worth it, I promise.
Yes, and today we were talking about oversharing and trauma dumping online. We're going to get into the who the fuck did I marry TikTok series trend. We're going to get into the trauma dumping candy bowl salad TikTok trend. We're going to talk a little bit about reality TV, and we're also going to talk about Tana Mongeau. But before we get into all of that, we're going to start the episode as we always do, talking about what we're so wet and so dry about in this very moment. And if you guys don't give a fuck, if you're new to the channel and you just want to get into the topic, it is okay to skip us. We won't take offense, but we will catch you later. Hopefully you come back. But this week, I am so wet. I think I mentioned him in the last episode, but FD Signifier, I just found his YouTube channel, and he does a lot of like video essays that can be anywhere from like 30 minutes to an hour, I think, to like 3 hours. So I like to sit and like watch those. He does like real deep dives. And I actually found him, I think, through Ollie Sunvia and Khadijah, because they had mentioned him and he's had them on. But
that's how you know.
Right, like he's so good, and he covers a lot that has to do with the manosphere, which you guys know if you listen religiously, like we talk about that a lot, but it's so refreshing to have like a cis heterosexual man talking about that stuff. Like I have not come across any others. I've watched like other gay men video essayists and podcasts,
right,
but not as many like cis het men.
Dude.
So shout out to him. He's fucking killing it. And yeah, hopefully we work together in the future. That'd be like
for real. My So Wet for this week, it's so funny because this show is so old, but I remember being at Emerson College and people are like, How I Met Your Mother is like the greatest sitcom to ever exist. And I'm like, okay, you guys, like whatever. But I don't know. Because I'm very like, I go all in with things, and I'm not like a sitcom watcher. Like my preferred genre of TV is either like a thriller, like something with a lot of suspense, or just like a cute family dynamic. Yeah. But I don't like sitcoms. I don't watch, and the jokes are so dated, like the fat phobia, it's bad, but it's not like because it's like 2000s ish. It's not like the 90s, so it's a little bit better, but it's still like it's hard to kind of whatever. But I'm just loving it so much. I've literally I'm already on season 4, and it's just making me really happy. And the other thing I'm wet about is I really love watching live concerts. Like artists really be putting out concerts online for free. Like you can go to Sabrina Carpenter live concerts on YouTube, she has hours of her live vocals. And this is how I feel about most pop stars, but it's just like when they sing live, it's always so much better. Like they do a new twist, and pop is so like not auto-tuned, but it's just very like perfect in its nature and like all those things. But I just love artists live. Like that's my Roman Empire. So yeah.
Vibes. You and my roommate both.
I know.
I'll get on.
We're gonna watch Sabrina Carpenter and eat hot dogs and just talk and be gay.
I'm screaming. So cute. So cute. As for So Dry, I went out last night, kind of like a last minute decision. And it was like cute, fun, whatever, because I linked up with like 3 of my girlfriends. But the thing about it is like we always take so long to get ready. And I say like we, like me usually, but I was already ready because like I had recorded so my makeup was done.
Yeah.
So we were at my friend Lo's house for like a couple hours. We finally decide where the fuck to go. We go to this rave, right? You have to pay to park, and then you have to take a fucking shuttle bus from the parking lot to the rave. Jesus. Like it was a school bus that was like redone, whatever. So we get to the rave, and then all of these bitches find out about a mansion party in Alpharetta, which if you live in Atlanta, like that is far the fuck away, and I live in Midtown, so I was like, there's no way I'm going to fucking Alpharetta. So we did not even enter the rave. And then they were like, okay, we're gonna get back on the fucking shuttle bus and go back to the car and go to Alpharetta. And I was like, I love you bitches so fucking much. It is 1:30 in the morning. I'm calling my man and he's picking me up. So I left. Like I still had a good time with them. Like it was still cute to kiki. But I'm just like, us girls are so funny because we can never get a fucking plan together. But the fun is really like when you're with them on the way and all that shit anyway. Like it's not even always the event. So like I still had a good time, but like I'm not in the business of going out until like 4 a.m. anymore. Like, you know, once in a while, but like last night I was not feeling it. I had to
I'm proud
today,
of you, dude.
So,
also, like, so where'd you take that picture? Outside the function?
Outside the rave. Yeah, we literally walked up and they were like, okay, like the tickets are $20, which we knew before we got there. But then they're just like, yeah, we're not $20 to go. God. So I'm just like, bitch, like we cannot get it the fuck together. But that's, you know, so it was cute still.
That's so funny. I guess my dry is like I've just been had like a really hard time sleeping lately. Like I'm like tossing and turning. I'm like sleeping on, you know, when like your pillows go on one side, but then you like switch everything. Like I've been doing that because sometimes it helps. But it's just so hard. But it's like stupid because I know it's because I drink Celsius like all day. So yes, I have a problem, guys. But it's not fun. So that's my dry. I don't know.
Yeah, you got to get some melatonin, some sage, dude, some meditation vibes.
The shroom gummies, like
yes, I finished all mine, all 4 packs of them, guys. I don't know if our code is still active, but if it is, it's so wet on Tailored Mushrooms. If you guys want to check them out, but I think it's expired. 50% off. I think it's expired by now. Anyway, so let's get into today's episode. Like I said before, we were talking about oversharing and trauma dumping online, all of the trends that are existing, where it came from, all of that good stuff. But first, I want to talk a little bit about the history of oversharing. And I found this article from theconversation.com, and it's called To Overshare, the Long Engendered History of TMI. You know, we got to bring gender into fucking everything. And it talks about Lena Dunham, which, have you seen her show?
Yeah, I think that sounds very familiar to me.
Girls?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, it's so controversial. Like, people either loved it or hated it. I've honestly never watched it. Like, I tried to, but I think it's on Peacock. It's on some platform.
Is it like gay a little bit or no?
I want to say yes. Like,
I think I know what it is.
But it's also like very like white woman coded, like kind of problematic. Right. I don't know. So I've never seen it. Can't really speak to that. If you guys have seen it, comment what you think below once we get into everything. But so there was Lena Dunham. They're talking about Lena Dunham and also this woman named Emily Good, who's a writer and former Gawker employee. And she's often credited for popularizing the term overshare, which didn't exist before this. So a little bit more from this essay. It says, despite its ubiquity in contemporary culture, oversharing is rarely defined as a term. In 2008, Webster's New World Dictionary made oversharing their new word of the year. Chambers Dictionary did the same in 2014. Both dictionaries describe oversharing as the act of divulging inappropriate amounts of personal information. According to Webster, overshare is a new word for an old habit made astonishingly easy by modern technology. It is yet another product of digital advances that allow people to record and transmit their lives in words, videos, and graphics to anyone with internet access, friend, or foe. As this definition indicates, the rise of the term in the 21st century context reflects the affordances of Web 2.0, user-generated content, and latterly social media. But what is most interesting about oversharing as a critical term is how often it is used to describe a negative social practice that is uniquely female. To overshare seems, for instance, to be a gauge of quantity when it often implies quality. Those who overshare are rarely sharing too much information, but they are sharing a particular kind of information that is deemed to be inappropriate to the listener.
Tea,
That's tea, right? Because this,
Yeah.
I didn't have this piece of research. Like, I had the whole rest of the fucking outline done, but I was like, there's something missing. Like, oversharing feels very woman-coded,
Right.
and queer and taboo, and it makes so much sense. Like, when we talk about gossiping in the Are We Dating the Same Guy Facebook group episode, it's kind of the same thing. Like, gossiping is like a woman-coded term,
Right.
to kind of oppress us more and keep us from like sharing things about our personal lives and experiences.
Yeah, like I feel like when I think of TMI, like the first thing comes to mind is like, oh, like I got my period, and it's like
Yes.
TMI, which is like super like dated, but I feel like that is like just what comes to mind as like a stereotype with that phrase, or if it's like you are, because I feel like I've always been someone that's comfortable talking about sex and comfortable talking about the intricate details
Yes.
of the sex I've had. And, like, I've had a lot of women friends in my life that made them feel, like, very uncomfortable,
yes.
which is valid, but I, like, also internalize that I should be ashamed of that, and it's not something that should be spoken of. Like, at the same time, it's okay to not want to talk about that
Yes.
shit all the time, but I think it's just, I don't know, since a lot, at the time, I felt like a lot of women that was just, like, hush, hush, I felt like I was, like, some crazy whore for wanting to share.
Yeah, exactly, because it's kind of used as this way to oppress us, similar to the whole gossip idea when it comes to sexual misconduct and like rape and like all of those things. Like, people were like, oh, it's gossip, it's hearsay, so they don't like, take action
and we talked about
on
that.
it.
Yeah,
And same with like when you're talking about periods, or even like women having like sex and being sex positive, or even like queerness, like, oh, like, you know, you can be gay but not outward, like don't overshare about it, like those types of things.
Yeah, babe, you are,
Yeah.
Okay.
But I want to put some memes on the screen, guys. If you know us, you know we love memes. We post them every fucking week for all of our episodes. But
On
there's
Wednesdays.
a lot about, on Wednesdays, a lot about like, trying to be mysterious, not wanting to overshare. So it's a constant anxiety that I think a lot of women have, and especially with social media. As the definition said, this is kind of a newer thing when we have so much access to post online and just have it be visible to anyone. I think, you know, oversharing, quote unquote, has become more popularized.
Yeah.
And so we're more anxious about it. But I want to talk a little bit before we get into all the deep, deep stuff about what is oversharing online, because everyone can have a different fucking definition.
Right.
But this article from Illinois' WorkNet talked about, you know, how to not overshare online and blah, blah, blah. And I didn't love some of these examples, but I'll read them for you guys. So it says, posting intimate details about your relationships, friendships, family matters, or personal drama, using social media as a soapbox or a way to vent your emotions, posting photos or videos of things meant to be private, very vague, posting embarrassing photos or videos of yourself or others, they would fucking hate TikTok, regularly posting your meals, checking into everywhere you go, posting about wherever you are doing at a given moment multiple times a day, sharing too much info about or photos of your children. What do you think?
This just like reminds me of like when they make fun of like Gen Z or like people with social media, like boomers or whatever, they'll be like, no one cares that you're eating a taco right now.
Right.
And it's just like, y'all didn't have the tools to do that. And it's like, this was the first time the internet was like brought to us, and like this new age, like not like we didn't know how to handle it perfectly because you guys weren't there to teach us. You had no fucking idea. And so as like, yes, I think it's annoying if someone's like posting everything about their life, but it's also like that is literally a new career to do. Like,
yes.
That is literally a fucking career to overshare online, and influencers that maybe got big on TikTok for something random, like not to be like they're untalented, but they didn't have some sort of art to share. It's literally just their lives. Like, that is what they're influencing and sharing. And like, is it all perfect and not problematic? No. Like, of course, some of it is a little bit too much, and it also just depends. But honestly, just going back to that first quote, it's like, was it too much, or were you just not the target audience that directly related to it? So it hit you a little bit differently. Because at the end of the day, it's like we have complete control over what the fuck content we view.
Yes.
So you get like, if I think, oh my God, that girl shared way too much, unfollow her. She's good. She has other, So I don't know. I think breaking it down like this is like very silly. But I do think, like, I do think it's annoying when people are like, this is everything, blah, blah, blah. But I don't follow accounts like that. Yeah, you don't look at their stuff. They're in their bag. Like, I wish I was in my bag like that. Like, I wish I could do that. So who am I to judge?
And even people who aren't. Like, I have some, like, friends who just post close friend stories with, like, updates to, like, their friends. Or, like, oh, they're literally, like, asking a poll or, like, showing their food or recommending a restaurant. Like, using it as a social tool as well, which is what it was created for. Like, it's like the new third space for a lot of people.
And when you love that person, like, a lot of the close friends I'm on are like your friends from Atlanta, and like I just like, I really like love the women, respect them, so like I want to read it. But if it wasn't like someone I was close with, like, I'd be like, okay. And also with the close friends, like, people will literally post, like, do you really want to be a part of this or not? Like, I feel like it is kind of like exclusive. Yeah. So it's not like it's just like putting it everywhere. Like, I feel like close friends is like the perfect happy medium, because you just pick people that, are going to relate and want to hear about it. You're not annoying anyone. They're all there for a reason. But also, you shouldn't worry about annoying anyone. Like, just do whatever the fuck. Well, we'll get into it. Yeah.
I mean, well, yeah, because there are, like, when it's talking a little more about drama and trauma dumping, which we're going to get into in a little bit, like, those, I think nowadays, because, posting your meal when you're out to eat, I do that all the fucking time. When I'm out to eat or have drinks with friends, I'm posting my fucking food.
But the food looks good as fuck. Like, it's not like you did your Taco Bell at night,
Right, but, like, I still want, like, and people do that, too, like, because the new thing is being, like, artsy, just regular, like, not giving a fuck. Like, because Instagram is more manicured, TikTok is, like, every social platform has a different kind of strategy. And I think people on TikTok are much more embarrassing videos, funny shit, like, and my real life. And why
is that, do you think? Because I think maybe Instagram used to be like that first in the beginning, but as an app becomes more monetizable, if that's a word, and like all these. Because remember, TikTok didn't used to have shop. It didn't used to have ads. Yeah. So I hope it's not moving in the Instagram direction. Like, I hope it stays, because you're right. And I feel like because it was created during the pandemic, like it got popular during the pandemic at a time where we all needed something. I feel like it has that, like, certain and something.
It's video, I think, too. Like, I feel like with video, people have to be themselves. Like, you can edit it, but it, like, requires more. Well, maybe it doesn't.
Well, it depends what you're posting.
Yeah, because, like, people can edit their photos and pose in a certain way to make everything look super pretty. But I feel like video stuff, like, it's more likely for it to be funny and have different, like, cases or ways to be entertained. I don't know. But
I feel that.
But we asked you guys, have you ever overshared online? And 77% of you guys said yes, 23% said no, and 0% said maybe. So the majority of us have definitely overshared by whatever definition that we believe that is. I definitely have, like, for sure. Things that, like you said, I'm not concerned about at all. Like, I overshare on this podcast all the fucking time, online, all of those things. Occasionally, I'll have a moment where I'm like, oh, we should edit that out of the episode, or, oh, I'm going to delete that story or delete that tweet, or, like, whatever the fuck. But, like, I try not to overthink it,
Yeah. I will say, though, like, don't make fun of me, guys. Like, okay, so, like, when I was, like, first, this guy kind of, like, hurt me, like, when I was in middle school. Like, we didn't do anything, but, like, he said something mean. And I started to cry, and I was in my bathroom. And I remember I was, like, 11, 12. I was like, damn, bitch. Like, you actually look kind of good when you cry. Like, it's kind of like a look or whatever. And so, like, I don't know, like, what it is.
Tumblr era.
But I feel like I have something. Like, obviously, when I'm crying, it's, like, bad. But, like, when I'm about to, it's, like, a little tear. Like, low-key, it's kind of Vogue. Like, I don't know. So, like, when I was in, like, high school and, like, early college, like, even going through our old, like, Finstas or whatever, like, the crying pics were excessive. But it's genuinely because I thought I looked good in an artistic way. So
yes, you're an
that's
artist.
so Emerson of me. Emerson College, where we went. I know people don't know what the fuck we're saying when we say that. It was just like a very small artsy school, like very whitewashed, but everyone was gay. Like, I don't know. It was a time. But so I definitely have done some really cringy things in the past. All that to say, but now I feel like I just look at it differently. Like, I feel like the way I used to trauma dump versus how I trauma dump now is very different. And I know we'll get into it. So I feel like it's just like, I don't know. I used to just be so blunt. Like, the captions we used to post back in
on
college.
Our Finstas?
Dude.
Because Finstas, we actually just had a conversation about this. Like, I just deleted my Finsta.
I just blocked everyone. I unfollowed everyone. Besides, like, you and my roommate, I kept y'all on there, whatever.
Because that was giving, like, close friend story before close friend story was really, like, a thing.
Like, but I let anyone follow.
But I used it like my journal. Like, I was like, this is just life.
I did, too.
But we were young. We were, like, learning how, and our parents would be like, oh, don't post. Teachers, worry about your social media footprint. But, like, we didn't give a fuck. Like, we were just trying to grow up. Yeah, I don't fucking know. But we did have one person submit. She said, I honestly only complain about the little things because I'd be wanting to, but I'd never put my serious business on here. There's some people that be wishing worse on you. And that's kind of what we talked about. Like, people be fucking hating, but you can't really pay attention to it because, I don't know.
I know. It's really hard. And that's why it's like the close friends, like, that's like the safest space to do it if you want to do it online,
Yeah.
And I also feel like oversharing could be like it could be a subconscious tendency because I feel like oversharing just comes with social media in a sense. So it's kind of weird.
Yes.
Yeah,
we're going to get into that a little bit too, like the reasons why people post what they do and like if they're even thinking it through at all.
We're not.
Yeah, we're really not.
So since we're going to talk a lot about oversharing in this episode and then also get into trauma dumping, we did want to ask you guys if you thought there was a difference between the two. And 88% of y'all said yes, there is, and 12% said no, there is not.
Yeah, I definitely think that there is. I think like you can overshare about trauma without it being trauma dumping to a point. Like, I think there's a line.
Can you? Yeah.
I think so. Like, you can, like, especially with humor and stuff, which we're going to get into later. Like, you can kind of, like, throw something, like, out there casually in conversation that's a little bit like, oh, are you good? Without, like, dumping a ton of trauma. Like, you know what I'm saying? I think that there's
so
that.
much sense. Yeah.
But I think any trauma dump is inherently an overshare.
Right. They do have a lot of synergy, but at the same time, I feel like the word trauma, and I feel like it's misused so much as well. Yeah. Because it's like trauma drama, like those types of things. But overall, I feel like oversharing, I do more think of the like, this is what I ate today. But it's also like, this is exactly what went down in my relationship fight that he probably wouldn't want me to put on the internet,
Yeah.
And trauma dumping, like, I don't know, it takes place online and in relationships, and I don't know, I feel like it's very different.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the things that I was struggling, like, a little bit when I was planning this episode. So, like, what we're going to get into next, guys, is the whole Who the Fuck Did I Marry TikTok trend series. And at first, I was like, this is more of an overshare than a trauma dump because some of them are, like, very bad relationship issues. But I'm like, is that really trauma? But then through doing more research, I'm like, I pretty much read this article that I didn't include, and it was like, there can be over 600,000 different presentations of PTSD coming from a variety of different things that have happened. So, like, everyone's trauma can be different. So what would be traumatic for you may not be traumatic for me, et cetera, et cetera. So like these Who the Fuck Did I Marry TikTok trends, I think that they're overshares, but they also are very much about trauma as well. So they could be considered a trauma dump.
Yeah.
So I just want to throw that out there. So
I love that.
Yeah, here are some of the just quick little clips of the top Who the Fuck Did I Marry series that went super viral.
Part 37, Who the Fuck Did I Marry? So,
Part 6, Who the Fuck Did I Marry? Okay, we are now in a committed relationship.
Who did I date? Not marry. Lie number 22.
We found this article from the New York Times that's called Wanna Go Viral? Tell Your Story in 22 Parts. A Dickensian tradition finds a new audience on TikTok. In February, Teresa Johnson, better known as Risa Tisa, captivated millions with a series entitled Who the Fuck Did I Marry? Her creation, which comprised more than 50 videos, unspooled the many apparent fabrications of Miss Johnson's ex-partner, Legion, who Miss Johnson said had lied to her about his career, family, and wealth. Scrolling through her account, the videos blur together into a grid of images of Miss Johnson as she speaks directly to the camera in clips totaling over 6 hours of watch time. The clips, easily digestible dopamine hits, seem to scratch a particular cultural itch in an era when attention spans are often short. In the months since, a number of influencers and content creators have taken their cues from Miss Johnson, stylizing their personal stories into multi-part narratives. Recently, Brooke Schofield, the content creator who hosts the podcast Canceled with Tana Mongeau. Mojo. Jesus, this
Is it Mojo? I think it's Mojo.
Okay.
Tana Mojo.
With Tana Mongeau, posted a series in which she accused an ex-boyfriend of telling a number of falsehoods during their brief relationship. Miss Schofield's former paramour, the musician Clinton Kane, best known for his song Chicken Tendies, has since rebutted with his own lengthy series of video clips. His series is titled Who Did I Date, Not Marry, in a nod to Miss Johnson's opus. Inspired by Miss Schofield, the content creator Chris Olsen, okay, I know who that is, scored millions of views across a 19-part series about a negative experience in a past relationship. Haley Khalil, known online as Haley Bailey, posted a similarly dramatic tell-all about an ex-boyfriend she claimed was a billionaire. She has since deleted the videos and faced criticism online for the series, which some users believe she fabricated. Miss Khalil did not respond to a request for a comment.
Yes. So going off of this is just kind of, everything about the Who the Fuck Did I Marry TikTok series. But When Trauma is Trending on TikTok is a video essay by Swell Entertainment. It's the first one I watched by her, and she's really good.
Oh, nice.
And she talked about each of these instances, and she was very upfront with, everybody has the right to tell their story, and we should not police who and when and how people tell their story, because that is their personal business and that is their personal right. And we also can't define what is and isn't trauma for certain people because, that's them.
Nice.
And she also stressed, that we don't need to crack the code, which has been another big thing out of this.
It's
so fucking bad. And it connects very deeply to our dating paranoia episode, I think, and then also a deep dive into the Facebook dating group. So those are both good episodes to watch with this one.
Yeah.
But essentially, so Risa Tisa explicitly said, don't try to find my ex-husband Legion, who she named him because she didn't want to implicate him, like whatever. And people, of course, fucking did. With Brooke, she kind of came about telling her story because like Clinton had said something and then it led her to, kind of try to set the story straight, I guess. And that's why she posted hers. And then Chris was inspired by her, whatever. But Haley is known for being very problematic on TikTok. And she did this like series she's known for like kind of copying other content creators, like stealing their exact content and using the same sound and going viral. So like a lot of people don't like her. She was canceled for like what she wore at the Met Gala. Like there's a whole bunch. I'm not really tapped into her. But essentially she used to have this series where she had like this like billionaire boyfriend and she would make content like satire kind of thing. And so she did this Who the Fuck Did I Marry series about this billionaire boyfriend, like I guess acting like it was real or satire, I don't know. But it turns out she, Swell Entertainment, in her video essay, someone else kind of did their internet sleuthing on this because they had grown up in the same town or went to the same high school as Haley.
No,
and essentially
that's my
lined up the timeline to see that like this was not a true story. It was like completely false. And also even worse, one of Haley's friends came out and said that she had just been venting about her experience with her boyfriend to Haley, and Haley took some of those details about the toxic-ish relationship and then went and made her own content like about it. So it was very problematic. But it kind of brings us to the question that I wanted to talk about, which is, what makes these stories so engaging, and do they have to be true? Because like the rest of this video, this article is essentially comparing them to Charles Dickens and talking about how it's a new way of storytelling with like a multi-part series.
Yeah.
So
because I'm like, because when she said that, like she pulled, or when you said that Haley pulled some from her friend or whatever, allegedly, it just reminds me of like writers and songwriters. Like I love to write. I love to write fiction, and I feel like I would, if I was going to write a book, I would absolutely pull shit that other people have told me.
Yeah.
Is it right? I don't know. Would I ever I would dramatize it or whatever, but
yeah.
I don't know. I don't think it's that deep. I'm not talking about the Haley situation. I definitely think it's super annoying when creators steal ideas from other creators that didn't go viral and then they go viral. I mean, that's been a huge discourse around TikTok dances, makeup trends, everything. Like a lot of people credit and a lot of people don't. And it's like a big problem for sure. But when it comes to the stories, I'm like, bitch, I don't give a fuck if it's real or not. If this is someone that, you know, is really, I guess if someone's really profiting and they're just lying and trying to seem genuine but not, then I guess it's a different story. But if you literally just go on TikTok and tell stories and some of them are lies, like, I don't know. I feel like I will catch myself, not even on the podcast, but like in real life, I'll kind of lie to make the story like maybe
embellish it or whatever.
Embellish it, or maybe if a part is traumatic, like I'll take it out. Like I feel like I will lie in that sense a little bit.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I think it's
everyone does.
It's a protective mechanism. Again, not talking about Haley specifically, but just the stories in general.
Yeah.
So I personally don't give a fuck, but I do. People get so, you know, attached to these influencers, you know, and it's like my favorite influencer is Drew Afawalo. If it came out that she, you know, lied and about something, I mean, I don't even know. Like, I just feel like we don't know them. We don't know them. I'm sure if I were her, I would lie sometimes too. Like, you have to protect yourself, but it is like if you want to create a genuine thing with the audience, like I don't think lying's a good way to go, but also I don't give a fuck what y'all do.
Yeah, because it was also, I think the other side of it that people found problematic is that like Risa Tisa and Brooke Sheffield and Chris were all talking about traumatic real life events that happened to them, and they were like sharing their story. So she was kind of making it satire and almost in a weird way like making fun of it. Kind of, so people were like, oh, that's fucked up because you're not respecting that people have actually gone through these like bad experiences. And I will say, like, I watched Brooke Sheffield's Who the Fuck Did I Marry? And I watched Clinton Kane's whole series. I haven't watched Risa Tisa's because it's long as fuck, and I didn't watch Chris's. But hey guys, this is Fiji, just popping in to say that this episode was recorded before Brooke Sheffield's racist tweets surfaced. I do want to say that I look at Clinton Kane's comments about his Asian heritage and Brooke's responses to speaking other languages a little bit differently now, knowing how Brooke conducted herself in the past. But all that to say, yeah, this was recorded before that happened. I'm a little bit like when I first came across the Brooke Sheffield stuff, I was like, this feels like a lot, and it feels like a lot of like internet drama, internet beef. Like I want to like ruin your name, I want to cancel you, like all of those things. Like not to say at all that the things he did were okay, because he lied about like a lot of fucked up things, you know, like lying in a relationship is never cool. Like same with Risa Tisa, and I think Risa Tisa was much more telling it because it was like a crazy story, and I guess she was a really good storyteller, like whatever, and she didn't want to like implicate Legion or whoever her ex-husband was, but Brooke kind of did. Like she was, you know, using Clinton's name and coming after him, and then he did vice versa to her. So like that's where like I'm like the ethics of it. Like I do agree with Swell Entertainment that it's everyone's right to like post whatever the fuck they want. Like it's not my business, like whatever. Yeah. But it does get a little bit like witch hunty in my mind, where it's like it feels like you're watching something unfold because there are a ton of hate comments. Yeah. Like on everyone's side, even Risa Tisa, who she didn't want people to find her ex-husband. But it becomes like people are watching this, they're consuming it, and they feel your trauma as well. I know. And then they want to like go to bat for you.
Right. I know, and it's like, is it on them to not take that so much into their own lives? Like just, this is just a video, but it's also like, these platforms are a way to truly connect and heal and share trauma and build community. So it's so complicated. And I think the crack the code thing, we've talked about that so much on this podcast. People just take it way too far. Even if the creator or famous person is telling people directly, please don't look into this. You know, people don't care. They love to be detectives for free. And I think it's one of the biggest problems with social media for sure. Yeah. Like, it just makes me think of that fucking woman that was like, if your husband was on a flight to Minneapolis or whatever at this time, he was on Hinge. Like, girl, like, get a life. Please get a life.
Right. Like, why are you so bothered? But people know that they'll go viral, and I think that's, like, also a little bit of a part of it now at this point. Like, Hailey Bailey she's someone who's repurposed other people's content, so it's like maybe Risa Tisa or Brooke were posting from a place of, like, I want to educate, I want to share about my experience, da-da-da, and then Hailey is taking it to a different level of, like, entertainment, and is that bad? Right. But a little bit more from that same New York Times article, I want to talk a little bit about the addiction loop of posting trauma and monetizing our trauma. So this article first says, on social media where fact-checking is often seen second to entertaining, fantastic and wild stories have become the coin of the realm. But telling stories in installments is a, pardon the pun, storied tradition. The modern day iterations harken back to the age of serialized fiction published in newspapers and pamphlets. Readers reportedly stormed the docks of New York City in 1841 when the first installment of The Old Curiosity Shop by Charles Dickens arrived from across the pond. On YouTube, extra-long videos are known as storytimes, a format popularized largely as the result of platform's monetization structure. The longer the video, the more ads that could be played during said video. A Twitter thread from 2015 about a road trip to Florida was eventually adapted into the feature film Zola, directed by Janixa Bravo. Wow. And the 2010s, you don't remember that movie about the two strippers? I think I told you to watch. It was a Twitter thread that they adapted into a movie.
That's crazy. I had no idea.
Okay, it was really good. But in the 2010s, the self-published platform Wattpad offered amateur writers a space to tell tales in installments. Some of Wattpad's biggest success stories even got the Hollywood treatment. Among them, One Direction fan fiction by Anna Todd was adapted into 5 Netflix movies. So this is just kind of showing the like intrigue behind like posting bite-sized bits of content, especially at a time where TikTok was kind of going into long form and trying to compete with YouTube to like gain users' attention and all of that. So it's like, this is in a lot of ways an age-old like storytelling mechanism, but it's taken in a different context because it's online and can be posted in the moment and not as maybe thought through, or maybe it's seen as a way to monetize. Like, we don't know what was in Risa Tisa's head really for sure when she first posted those 8 hours of those videos, you know?
We don't know so much, like with all the other creators as well. I will say, like, I really do love the comparison to Charles Dickens. Is that who wrote Great Expectations?
Yeah.
I loved that book.
Yeah, I don't think I read that.
I was like, I took honors English freshman year because I thought I was like cool or whatever, and I got in. Big mistake.
So
bitch.
Emerson.
Big mistake though, because that was the hardest class, and I never took another honors class again until senior year. I was like, that was horrible. Please give me to the general public. But I really do love that, and I think that, you know, those two examples, I think that's really cool. And I do think a lot of creators are secretly, you know, storytellers, and things can be that way. And I think that's maybe the good side about all of this, you know?
Yeah.
Where the other parts is like we've talked about is not so good.
Yeah, and we're going to get into this a little bit more next. So right now, like, that type of content is definitely a pop culture fucking moment, and I think it can be argued that it's art as well. But I want to bring us kind of more into the story time version of TikTok, the whole like put a finger down if this ever happened to you, like makeup story times, all of those.
Put a finger down if the way that you found out your ex cheated on you was because he was trying to prove that he was so loyal that he did a screen recording of all his text messages.
Put a finger down if at 21 years old you found out that your father wasn't your biological father and that one of your family members is blackmailing your family into telling you this.
Put a finger down if when you were 16, a boy that you were talking to invited you over to his house.
Put a finger down if after your damn near 3-year-long relationship, you were talking to a couple guys on Hinge. So the first guy that you were talking to, he goes to school in South Carolina 2.5 hours away from you, and the other guy you were talking to only goes to school an hour away from you in Virginia. So one night you got bored and you texted both of them, hey, what are you doing? Can I come over? And whoever responded first, you drove to see them. So the guy in Virginia responded first.
So I want to start us with Tana Mongeau, who's honestly an iconic person in pop culture at this moment. She is, ironically or not, on the podcast with Brooke Schofield. Like, it was her podcast first, called Canceled, because she's been canceled for so many fucking times. And she started her career as a creator, influencer, whatever, on YouTube. And around 7 or 8 years ago, she started with these like story time videos that would be anywhere from like 20 to 40 minutes, where she would talk about these crazy things in her life that happened. Some of which being, I got arrested at Coachella, story time. I fought a grown-ass couple at the airport, rant. I was arrested for drug possession, felonies. I smoked salvia and hallucinated terribly, story time. My stalker broke into my house. She also had one about being fucked with a toothbrush. Like, she overshared, she shared crazy shit. She's a great storyteller. She's very like charismatic, all of these things. And we also have to think she was very young at this time. Like, she was like 15 or 16, and she was growing up in Las Vegas.
Stop. No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Have you ever watched any of her videos?
No,
or her
dude.
podcasts or anything?
I haven't, but my sister does. She loves Canceled. So I do know a little bit, and I know the podcast, Do We Know Them? They've covered like a little bit on her. Yeah. So I know but I know that it's huge. It's all everyone's talking about right now, for sure.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I was not as hip. Like, I feel like the most I knew about her was back with, who are those fucking YouTuber problematic brothers?
Oh,
one of them
God.
boxes now, the blonde boy, Jake Paul and Logan Paul.
Oh.
She like dated one of them a while back or something, but I was never as much into like Cody Ko, like all of and Cody Ko actually, so it's just come out that like they had sex when she was underage, so it's statutory rape. And she kind of like said this on a podcast, and she was like, oh, I was 17 at the time. Oh, is that my trauma? And kind of seemed to like realize it in the moment. So now people are really kind of trying to cancel Cody Ko because like, what the fuck? Like, she was really young. Oh, and that's what I want to talk about next. So I watched this YouTube video essay by Paige Christie, which it was my first one of hers watching, and she's great. I definitely want to watch.
She's serving in this screenshot you put in the outline, bro.
So cute, like outfit, background, everything, and like she had all the information. But she did this essay called Tana Mongeau Was Never the Problem, We Are, because after all of this Cody Ko stuff is coming out, I think people are really rethinking how they see Tana. Mm-hmm. So she talked about, you know, how Tana really kind of piloted this storytime era that began on YouTube. And she was very brutally honest. She had an unfiltered approach. It was kind of the end of the skit era, and it was more of like the about my real life kind of era. Mm-hmm. She's known for that clip, like bleach and tone, like I want to bleach and tone. You know that soundbite on TikTok?
Yeah.
She had the stalker video. She was very edgy, and she was on the edge of adulthood, but she was she was still a fucking teen, which is so important to fucking remember. Like, she was underage, and she had a really difficult upbringing that she doesn't talk about as much. But her parents were very much not in her life, and she was growing up in Las Vegas, so she didn't have a lot of direction. And she talks kind of openly about like how her fans were like, you know, there for her. Like, she was sharing these stories to help them. Like, she was kind of seen as a big sister on the internet. But she's known for being very problematic. Like, there were instances with the N-word. There were instances with like bad like sexual things she said, like all of this kind of problematic stuff that got her canceled. But pretty much Paige Christie makes the argument that she was highly sexualized in a similar way that Britney Spears was, in that, like, you know, she was doing kind of all of this sexual stuff, but she was still a child and she didn't really like know any better. And so like the reputation that she has now is kind of weird because we were not consciously thinking of her age at the time that she was creating all of this stuff. And then also today, maybe because of the content that she created, we focus so much on the gossip around her and like her sexual identity, and nothing at all about like her entrepreneurial spirit and her artistry, because she was like killing it on YouTube. Like, she was like getting millions of views. Like, some of these have like 2.9 million, 3.6 million, 8.2 million, like millions of views. She was one of the first like really big women creators leading this shit. So kind of like rethinking her. But there's this clip from one of her story times where she talks about how she got banged with a toothbrush from 8 years ago. And I just want to play the beginning of this clip real quick.
Hi guys, it's Tana Mongeau, and today's video is going to be another story time. Tana, you're the most creative person on YouTube. Thanks, I know I'm so good at like the diverse videos that I post. I know. Yeah, I know that I keep doing a lot of story times, but I just can't fucking stop. Like, for some reason this month, everything ever has been like reminding me of so many like random like weird stories that I just want to tell you guys, and I just keep going and going and going. Eventually I'm gonna run out, maybe I won't, my life's pretty crazy, I don't know. But yeah, this one today was brought up to me with my friends, and I was like, this is inappropriate, I'm gonna tell it on the internet.
So what did you think of young Tana?
I mean, blind reaction, like not really knowing and disregarding all the problematic stuff. Like, I thought she was cute and quirky. She said something, oh, that's crazy, I'm gonna put it on the internet or something. And yeah. I do feel like, I don't know, she kind of reminded me of like a young me, low key. She did. Yeah. Like, she was very quirky and just didn't give a fuck. And I don't know, I liked it.
Yeah, she kind of has that vibe of that crazy girl that you went to school with, that you're like, oh my God, like they're so fun, but also you never know what they're going to do. And she kind of reminds me of us in college. Like, we were always the ones oversharing, like being like questionable, like whatever. Like, she kind of has that vibe where you're like
problematic.
Yeah, being problematic, like all of that stuff. But I thought it was really interesting when she was like, you know, I'm sharing, I don't even know why I'm sharing it, guys. Like, she kind of has that self-deprecating thing going on, but she's also like, I know, like I'm like the best on YouTube right now, like whatever. Like, she knows what she's doing, but she's also doing the very like woman thing or girl thing of being like, oh, but like I'm so crazy, like I'm so silly, like whatever, you know, when she's honestly
so
killing
young.
it.
Like, that's
so
crazy that
young.
She's able to have that like kids like that. I don't get how they're so motivated to be an entrepreneur at that age, because all I cared about at that age was like the next person I was going to flirt with over text. Like, you know, it honestly is. And you just think she's getting on there, but she knows she's making money and all of that. So it's crazy.
Yeah, and it's probably a mix too, because she is young. She might not know completely, but she definitely has like artistry behind it. Like, she knows what she's fucking doing. But the self-deprecating nature of it, and kind of like the I'm just a girl vibe, but like telling crazy stories, reminds me a lot of also Call Her Daddy, which you guys know the podcast Call Her Daddy. Sophia Franklin and Alex Cooper started, you know, I want to say it was like 6 years ago at this point, but It was originally the two of them, since had that big, massive split up. And Alex Cooper has kind of gone in a very, very different direction. She's a lot more like, I want to say like poised, like cleaner, like they don't talk about as many crazy stories. She's married now. Sophia does a little bit more of the like self-deprecating, raunchy stuff, but Alex definitely doesn't. But this is a episode of Diary of a CEO with Alex Cooper, where she's reflecting on her career and talking about her success. And the interviewer asked her, you know, what is one of the costs of being a CEO or being like a podcast creator? What is one of the costs of this? So we're going to watch this clip.
I've struggled a lot with like who I'm having around me. Then on the personal side of things, I don't want to say the word exploiting, but I'm just going to say it and then I'm going to take it right back. But like exploiting my life for 4 years, there is a cost of like, I don't expect a lot of people to relate to it. It's really weird that I've talked about my sex life and my breakups and my heartbreak and friend breakups and family issues and trauma and all the things you can possibly imagine. Like that's not normal to be that open about it on the internet. So naturally, I think there's like a what's next, like always trying to one up yourself. And that can be really detrimental. And I think when I look back at the early days of Call Her Daddy, like I'm embarrassed by some of the things that I said. Not that I'm embarrassed by the product. I think it was great. But there's some things that I was like, why did I say that on the internet? Like that was mean or that was, but it was all like, I don't think people understand, like we were being rewarded by how much crazier it was. Every week it was like, if you get crazier, the views go up, the clicks keep coming. So it was like this really diabolical feeling in your head where it's like morally, I don't know if I should be saying this, but it just keeps getting bigger the more that we keep saying wild shit. And I think in the beginning we had a handle on it. And then when we hit like episodes 50, 60, it was like throwing shit at the wall because people just wanted to see us like dance. It was like, do something crazy again this week. And that's why I have some empathy for creators that have taken it too far, where you see that line is like, they push it. Everyone loves right when you're teetering the line. They're like, oh yeah. The minute you cross the line, even though they've been encouraging you to go farther, and you fall off, what's wrong with you? You're disgusting. Like that's awful. You're a bad person. So it's like, it's a very, very fucked up industry to be a part of because like you're rewarded for the chaos, but if it's too chaos, then you're out.
I'll be honest, with a lot of pop culture stuff, I do live under a rock. I do recognize this person. I've never listened to Call Her Daddy. I know she's so like famous and up there. I know it's like ridiculous that I don't know a lot, but just from that one clip, I don't know. A part of me does feel a little bit bad for her. I think a lot of people that hate online with people that do chaotic stuff is they don't get how it's rewarding like that. They don't get that you have managers and people around you encouraging you to do that, to reach higher success. And you think that's a good thing. And I think the analogy she said of like the very people that are encouraging you to push that line. And then when it's crossed, they're like, you're crazy, you're so problematic. And when she said, you know, it's not normal to share your trauma and be so oversharing online, I really relate to that because I do feel that things that I've said on this podcast and things I've just, you know, said in public, honestly, I'm just like, I think I have always felt a little bit different. Why am I so open? And why do I continue to be so open when sometimes it has hurt me? But I do think it's a beautiful thing to be willing to share and to not take life so seriously and be self-deprecating. So I don't know, but I think it's very intense and I think people might view her a certain way, but I think she honestly was giving really intelligent and this like very self-aware. She's obviously gone to therapy, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I feel like this, I mean, Call Her Daddy, honestly, as a podcast, like, I didn't always love. I kind of like Sophia Franklin more than Alex Cooper, but, like, I find their journey really interesting because, you know, we're a sex and relationships podcast. Their start, I think, is also very unique in that, like, they were bought by Barstool, which is, like, a very male-dominated audience, and I think they were pushed to, like, exploit themselves in a different way. But the product of Call Her Daddy, I think, was really great for women. And same with Tana, like the girls that she was talking to about all these crazy stories, like she was a big sister for them. And so was Sophia Franklin and Alex. And all three of them were being very, very open about their sex lives, dating lives, saying things that like men say you probably shouldn't say. They were creating community around these things, but it also comes at a cost of like their personal lives. And like Tana's been canceled. Like Alex has gone in this different direction where people, I mean, I've even kind of felt like, oh, she's like girl boss washed her podcast and it's less real in the way that it used to be. And I find myself, even with us, when we first started, we had no clue what we were doing, and we were a lot more centered around like crazy party stripper story time stuff and like relating it to a topic, but like with less direction. And we've even felt like, I know me personally, like I used to share like more about my current dating life or even like friend drama, shit like that. And sometimes I'm like, where is the line in that? Because like, while I want to think that the deeper message is connected to this episode, you never know how the other person is going to receive it and how it's going to come back to you later on.
Yeah.
You know?
I think the relationship piece is honestly the hardest, because I think that I fall in love really hard and I get mad, you know, really hard as well when things end. And there are certain things I've said about exes that I do regret, and I feel guilty, like if they were going to watch that, because honestly, a lot of it is serious, but a lot of it is also just me expressing my emotions and how I felt that particular day, because it's ever changing. And I think the ask, first of all, is for people to, and it's hard because you can't ask your audience to relate to that kind of thing. They don't relate to it. You know, if they're not a content creator, you can't ask them to relate to that. And people always say, like, or Drew Afawalo always says, like, if you're friends with other creators, it's a lot better because they will understand that while your audience doesn't. And it's okay they don't understand that, but we can't expect them to. But I feel like the ask is to just understand that people's minds change and the way that people feel about certain experiences also change. People make mistakes. Like, I think all of the people that have probably hated on her and other people have done maybe just as problematic things or even worse before, but they're not in the spotlight, so they don't understand that. And I think it's easy for us to overshare now a lot more because our following isn't big, you know? I mean, I feel like it's definitely growing, and I'm genuinely so fucking grateful, but I think it would hit different if we did have 10,000 subscribers, even just 10,000. I think that would be different for me. Not to say I'm going to stop. I don't really think I can. I think that, just like she said, it's not normal to share online as much. And maybe this is conceited, but in hopes to unlearn that it's not, don't feel bad for sharing too much in conversations. I'm like, well, maybe that's special about me. Like maybe I have something special where it's like, I don't care, you know? And so, it's a really big conversation.
It is. Yeah, it is a big conversation because it's like we're watching like women grow up in real time, which I think is a very like healing experience in a way, because like they're being unfiltered, they're sharing real shit, they're dealing with backlash, and we're like relating to them in like real time. So like that's like art in itself, and it's also, I think, good for the greater society, because like Britney Spears, like we're now reflecting on how the culture treated her whole life because of how she grew up. So like we're seeing it in real time. But the other weird thing about this is like the whole monetization aspect, and like these people, it's also a job. So like they're exploiting their life, like she said, in a way to like profit. Like it's like to create a bigger, and did Tana even completely know that? Like I'm sure like a lot of it was like, oh, I'm trying to create a community, like I want to make money, like all of these things, but like you're not always conscious about how this is going to affect you like later on in life. Like maybe it's touching other people in a good way, but it's also pissing people off, and it's also hurting you and like your loved ones. So it's like this weird dynamic where you're trying to change the culture, but like, and people are going to tell you to not, but people are going to tell you should. So it's like a weird place to be.
I don't know if this is a reach as well, but I do feel like being a sex worker, and let me know if you feel this way as well, and being in a position or being in a job that wasn't respected, and I knew a lot of people looked at me a certain way, it makes this feel like nothing, honestly.
Yeah.
Because there was a time where I really did not want anyone to know that I stripped. And then slowly but surely I was like, nah, I want people, like, I'm going to talk about it because this is what I do fucking 5 nights a week or whatever the fuck. Like, so I don't know. I don't know if it's like being judged, because it's like that's what we're so afraid of, is like the backlash.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I feel like I felt that already a lot, that I'm kind of just like, whatever.
Right, because it's kind of like also the idea of like we felt shame in certain ways about being like sex workers and all of this stuff, because it's like that wasn't like, now it's more of a thing with OnlyFans creators. They still get like a lot of hate and like strippers and all of that stuff. But I think it's like it would have been good for us when we were growing up to have like someone to look up to for this to be like normalized in a way.
Yeah.
So I think like in us wanting to talk about certain things, it's to normalize it. Like for Tana to even talk about the things, I didn't really watch her, but it could have been helpful for me because I was fucking a lot when I was like younger and I was doing crazy shit and like partying and stuff like that. And sometimes, you know, as much as you're doing it for the story and you're the crazy friend and like whatever, like when you're by yourself, you're like, oh shit, like I feel like bad and weird because like, am I the only like crazy one? But then if there's someone else that's like you, you're like, oh, like someone else shares these experiences and I'm not like alone in this.
And that's how our friendship was born.
Yeah, that's how our friendship was literally born.
And the last thing I want to say about the monetization piece, I mean, picture yourself like the Call Her Daddy when they first started. You know, they're oversharing, they're being funny, whatever. They get picked up by Barstool. I mean, it's like you don't know what that kind of money is like. I don't know if they come from rich families, but if you have people in the room telling you to do certain things to achieve certain successes, I mean, we live in a capitalist, individualistic society. It's like the fucking urge to be like, okay, I'll do it because this is something you can only dream about. And that's another thing that, you know, we can't relate to. I can understand though. It's like empathy, right? Like I can understand that. And I think it would be really hard. And we've even talked about what if something like that happened to us? Like we want to have creative control. Like we would rather So Wet, So Dry pick up other podcasts rather than we be bought by someone else.
Yeah.
So, but we're also like, you know, we want to do this full time. I don't want to work in corporate America anymore. So if someone showed us that kind of money, what would you do? So it's really hard. And not to say like, you know, it's so hard. What would you like, whatever. People live really hard lives. But yeah. I do think there are battles that creators face and people are just like, oh, well, they get sent PR. Who gives a fuck? But this is a new industry. This TikToker, this is all new. People don't know what they're doing. And it really is sort of this, I mean, these people are like, not A-list, but they're up there. Yeah. But there really is a whole new generation of C-list celebrities that have some of the same, you know, fans that really famous people have. And that's never been a thing before, you know, influencers to be walking red carpet at the Grammys. Like, that's different. So no one has taught these people how to do that. They're just doing it on their own because it's still so new. Yeah, and it's like this exploitation or whatever that I keep like going back to. Sorry. No, that was because what you said, like there's no roadmap for it, and it's easy when like money is thrown at you, I think, to like change your values, because it's like I forget what quote I saw, but it was like something about it was talking about like sex workers. It's something, but it was like sex workers, like everyone is exploiting themselves to make money, just in different ways. Even a corporate worker like me at my corporate job, I'm exploiting like my brain, like I'm exploiting my time. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like I'm like changing myself to get this check. Yes. Same when you're a stripper, same when you're a creator. Like it is really hard in this capitalist society to like maintain your values, because like we need to live and we need to make fucking money. It's so true.
We're all fucking exploiting ourselves. It's just, what do you want to exploit yourself for? And like, what are the lines? And it's really hard to stick to those. But this article from Business Insider talks about trauma dumping, TikTok, and mental health experts. It says trauma dumping creates an open door for a survivor to be further harmed if their experience is met with harsh or critical response from others online, she said. There's also the potential for trauma dumping to become, quote unquote, addictive to the creator. Maya Petruccia, a mental health activist with over 100,000 TikTok followers, told Insider. I understand why some people use TikTok as a diary, Petruccia, who posts comedic accounts about her life, living with OCD said in a statement. You don't see the people receiving your story, so it's like you're talking to yourself until you see the comments that say, I'm so sorry you have to go through that, or OMG, I'm the same way. And that can get addicting. People may end up treating it like therapy. There's also a risk that creators end up defined by their trauma alone. Patricia said, on one hand, you want people to know the real you. That's irresistible. On the other hand, if all they're seeing is your trauma, are they seeing the real you? And like trauma, I think, is interchangeable with like how Call Her Daddy talked about sex, or like Tana is talking about sex, or these crazy party stories. Like if that's all you're sharing because that's what's getting you like clicks and views and money and all of that stuff, you're getting flattened into that's the only thing that you are.
Right. Which is, I don't know. I think that's on the culture a little bit, but you can argue it's on the creator. Well, it's like that's the content you're making if you're choosing not to let people see this other side of you. And I do feel like that's why we try to mix being intellectual with being silly, goofy, because I do think as past sex workers, one of our fears like could be that, oh, people don't, I mean, one of my fears, I'll speak for myself, is like she's dumb. She says like so much, she's not educated. But I'm actually very smart.
Yes, and degrees, bitch. Well, like a degree.
Come on, like honestly. And so I think it's really, really hard, but I do think that's maybe just a cost you pay. I mean, that's what happens online. People will literally just associate your face with said content in their brain because they're deep scrolling it. I mean, that's just what happens. And I say, you know, if you're a creator that gets stuck in that, I mean, as long as you feel okay, keep doing it. But also it's like branch out. And I think the right people will be receptive to that. I do.
Yeah.
But it's like the way she said it's treating it like therapy. People that are trauma dumping, they get so used to the comments. That's very interesting. And the whole idea of it being addictive, because I feel like a lot of times the video might have so much hate, but then you have this one comment where they resonated, and sometimes that one comment's enough to keep going. So it's hard to get hate, but also you're getting addicted to the good stuff, so it's a little bit difficult.
Well, also because if you end up in the right algorithm where you have people who think alike to you and you've created this community, you can border on creating an echo chamber where you're kind of, you know, you consistently overshare or trauma dump, and you're kind of doing it to appease them or get their views and all of that, but then you're like, there's no line, and so you might lose yourself in that too. So I think it's like a balance of you've got to like maintain your real life and get therapy outside of it and have a real life as well. Like you can't just seek to fill that void and stuff like online.
I think it's addicting. It could be addicting for the creator to post this type of content, and also addicting for the viewer as well, because we had an episode the other week and someone shared a story about, you know, I had to delete or I had to remove accounts. What were we? Oh, the dating advice, the dating paranoia episode. I had to, you know, delete TikTok for a month because you physically can't stop watching that that type of shit. So I feel like it's on both ends. And the part about echo chamber is so real too.
Yeah. Okay, so next I kind of want to bring us into a little bit more talking about how this kind of story time stuff became like popularized, because it's very new with social media, and also why like trauma and oversharing is such a core part of this quote unquote art form, I guess. Yeah. So there's this article, it's a pretty famous article. It's called The Case Against the Trauma Plot. Fiction writers love it, filmmakers can't resist it, but does this trope deepen characters or flatten them into a set of symptoms? And it's more about like movies, TV shows, all of that stuff, but I think it can apply and we'll connect it, so.
Yeah, and this article is from the New Yorker. So it says, if Greeks invented tragedy, the Romans, the epistle, and the Renaissance, the sonnet, Elie Wiesel wrote, our generation invented a new literature, that of testimony. The enshrinement of testimony in all its guises, in memoirs, confessional poetry, survivor narratives, talk shows, elevated trauma from a sign of moral defect to a source of moral authority, even a kind of expertise. In the past couple of decades, a fresh wave of writing about the subject has emerged, with best-selling novels and memoirs of every disposition. Internet writing mills offered $150 in a confession. It was 2015, and everyone was a pop culture critic writing from the seat of experience, Larissa Pham recalls in a recent essay collection, Pop Song. The dominant mode by which a young, hungry writer could enter the conversation was by deciding which of her traumas she could monetize, be it anorexia, depression, casual racism, Jesus Christ, or perhaps a sadness like mine, which blended all three. What? The body keeps the body keeps the score has remained planted on the Times bestseller list for nearly 3 years. What's the casual racism part?
I think like microaggressions and stuff like that. Like she didn't experience like explicit, intense racism, but more casual racism.
So she was experiencing.
So she was writing about the casual racism that she received and her sadness and depression and anorexia. So I want to talk a little bit more about like monetizing your trauma, because I think like with this personal testimonial kind of story time stuff, like it fills that void that I think a lot of us have in our personal lives, where maybe we're in like work circles, school, whatever, where we have this thing about us, whether it be an eating disorder, we're the only person of color, we're the only queer person, we're a woman in a male-dominated space, whatever, and we're seeking like opinions and experiences that are similar to ours to try to digest what we're going through. And so I think a lot of that content is very like necessary and has become like a really good thing in the age of social media, but like where is the line, and is it bad to monetize? Because I feel like we're almost on the other end of it where everyone is an expert, and you know?
Bro, I don't know. Like the answer to that question, I really don't know. And I honestly, to relate it to myself, I feel like for a long time, I was like, we have to talk about stripper stories on the podcast, because it's like, you know, we'll find people that relate to it, and it's like to use that to sort of start something. But how would that make us feel if our whole thing was just about being strippers and we're not even sex workers anymore, you know?
Yeah.
So it's a little bit weird, and I don't know, is it right to monetize off that? Because I agree. I think it's really, really good sometimes, but I think it can only go so far. Like to have your whole platform be about your eating disorder. I mean, personally, I've been in recovery for one, and I can't even follow the positive accounts that post like side by side my body when I'm not sucking in my body, and both of them are perfect. Like, okay, like I don't want to see that type of content even so I feel like you have to be at a certain place in your recovery to whatever it is, or like if it's racism, like your own inner learnings on that and how to cope with that and how to heal and all of that thing. So I don't know. I think people take it way too far, and everyone on the internet exactly likes to pretend like they have a degree for every single subject that you're covering. And so I think if it was a safer space, which can the internet be a complete safe space? No, it's the internet. So I think you're always going to have the pros and cons in that situation. And I think there's another way to raise awareness and create a safe space for eating disorders, depression, sex workers, whatever have you, than to have that be your only way to monetize off your content, I think.
Yeah, because it's weird in the sense that it's like there's always going to be a market for that, because like people are always going to have some sort of like interpersonal struggles that they want to fix or seek help for, or find personal experiences that relate to them. And then there's like the conversation of like what's just art, like something like Baby Reindeer, which I fucking loved and like thought was like very good for my healing and great to watch and all of those things. And that's just a piece of art. But then there's also like the whole new form thing where it's like, you know, TikTok therapists and life coaches and all of that, which gets into way more of monetizing it. Mm-hmm. But it's all like yeah, it's all like in a way kind of what I said before, where it's like you're exploiting it. But in any job that you do, in any way to make money, you're exploiting yourself. So like, why not exploit what you love and what you're passionate about?
Right.
I guess, but like I do agree that there's a line. Like someone who's recovering from an eating disorder can begin by writing a personal essay about their eating disorder and maybe go into like having a podcast and coaching and whatever, but like they've got to connect it to like a point where they're healing too, and they're getting like beyond it, and it's not just it doesn't become where they're stuck in it because they have to continue to make money.
Right. And that's like a big fear. Like, that's horrible. That sounds absolutely horrible. What if you relapse too, and then you have to make healing content and you're lying? Like, it's gonna feel terrible.
So kind of going off of like the online YouTube podcasts, all of that stuff, I want to bring us into reality TV, because I think a lot of times, is it the chicken or the egg? Is reality TV and TV influencing social media? Now I think social media influences TV in a lot of ways. But either way, there's a lot of trauma shit going on, particularly in reality TV. So we're going to watch this TikTok that I thought was really, really good by Tell the Bees. And this is also where I found that New Yorker article, so shout out to him for that.
We're talking about the traumaification of reality TV. And this is going to be a long form video just because I have a lot of thoughts and I want to make myself super clear and I don't want to like mince words. I think this is something that's been happening over the last couple of years, but it became super prevalent to me specifically with the season of Real Housewives of New York, this season of The Golden Bachelor, its inaugural season, and I just wanted to kind of talk about the over-reliance on the trauma narrative as a kind of shortcut to creating character and understanding characters. I really noticed this a couple of weeks ago on The Golden Bachelor, where Gary, the Golden Bachelor, was having repeated conversations with people. His whole thing is that he was married to his high school sweetheart for like 45 years, and then she unfortunately passed away, and it's very sad. But in one episode, I think 3 or 4 of the women also revealed that they were widows as a form to like connect with him. And it got me thinking about this over-reliance that current day reality TV has on this trauma plot, right? Calling it the trauma plot in reference to that iconic New Yorker article wherein it talked about how the current state of literature, a lot of actions are just kind of explained away by this like tragic backstory. And I'm not kind of downplaying what these women or Gary has gone through. Like, it is a very real thing. My specific beef is with 2 separate parts of this, parts that I'm calling over-identification and subsummation. I haven't talked about this in regards to the Real Housewives of New York because a lot of other people have, and they talked about it brilliantly, but it plays up this idea of over-identification brilliantly, wherein a lot of these people, I think as a shortcut to create like intimacy with each other and with the audience, will kind of bring up their story and say, oh, I have a dead mom, I have an alcoholic uncle, I have this, I have that. And it doesn't feel A, earned, or B, natural. It feels kind of odd. It's like foisted upon us because we don't know these people. Like 3 episodes in, Brynn was talking about her family and their struggles with addiction, and that was really beautiful. That was a brilliant moment because it let us understand how her abandonment issues affected her like inability to commit to real healthy adult relationships. But then every single episode after that had a different member of the group kind of bringing up their story and saying, well, I have a parent who passed away, and I have a parent who passed away, and my uncle was an alcoholic, and my uncle was and it just turned into this weird kind of one-upmanship where their only way, because they don't know each other, right? Their only way of actually relating to each other is by bringing up their stories, and it doesn't really work as a narrative device or like a production device. On The Real Housewives of Atlanta, supervillain Kenya Moore had multiple seasons where she was like running amok and wreaking havoc on the lives of all of her cast members. But when we finally found out that she acted the way, well, that's the thing. She doesn't act the way she does because her mother like gave her up and like refused to interact with her. Like, she clearly has very deep-seated mommy issues, but like they're not a convenient explanation for all of the bad shit that Kenya's done. It actually works as a character arc where it's like an onion, right? You're peeling back one layer and understanding, oh, Kenya acts like this because of X, but it doesn't like clear the slate. Whereas on the Real Housewives of New York reboot, 3 episodes in, the onion is peeled. They're coming in and they're saying, this is why I act the way I act. And I don't know if that's a reflection of current culture or like the way that a lot of these women are millennials and we are like overly therapized. So we like trot out our stories as soon as we meet people. But I'm a lot older than a lot of people on TikTok. This is not normal behavior. Like 10 to 15 years ago, you didn't sit around in a circle and like tell everyone the worst thing that had ever happened to you as a way to like get to know each other. Drag Race is another reality TV show that has become famous for this. Every single episode, another queen will kind of take their turn speaking into the workroom and talking about how, you know, the worst thing that's ever happened to them and everyone cries. And it's supposed to be like a healing moment. And it's why Drag Race has won 75 Emmys or whatever. But it's also like, a little bit difficult to contend with because it doesn't create a narrative arc. It just kind of hands us this person's like worst experience and expects us to sympathize with them, which it does. Like, honestly, on some level, of course it does. Like, it builds empathy. But I wonder if it's just like a production shortcut. Like, it doesn't actually feel like a real moment when, like, in the latest season, the girls literally took turns saying, I was homeless and I was this and I was that and I was that. And again, this isn't me casting like a moral aspersion on the act of sharing, because I know that with trauma, it does become a core part of your identity and it does fundamentally change the way that you experience the world. And it does fundamentally change like your memories and how you relate to other people. I just, like I said earlier, 15 years ago, people didn't talk like this. 10 years ago, people didn't talk like this. Like, that's part of my question where I'm questioning if it's like a cultural thing, because again, I keep bringing up this point, but like I know people in the comments are going to kind of misunderstand and say, oh, but I'm, I have this or this or this, and this is part of me and I talk about it because I need people to understand me. But like, we didn't always talk like this. Like, society has become much more accepting of mental illness and like it's become a much safer space for these conversations to happen. But at the same time, it's not a shortcut to get to know someone, because I'm sure that a lot of people, it's happened to me. I've, gotten drunk at a party and like overshared and then seen the blank stare in someone's eye where it's like, you're not creating intimacy. It's unearned. And that loops me all the way back around to over-identification. I worry that, like, I read a lot of books, right? This is literally a book account. I worry that it creates a sort of flattening where people will over-identify with their trauma. And instead of, like, the richness of the human experience is being reduced to the worst thing that's ever happened to you, right? Like, I consider myself like a vibrant, intelligent person. I would hate for someone to describe me as being like, oh, the one with the dead dad or something. Like, I am so much more than the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And I find it kind of frustrating that it's becoming such a crutch for reality TV. If you watch Fleabag, you'll remember the godmother who didn't know anyone's names. Literally the way that she would introduce people at parties is like, oh, this is my friend who's a widow. This is my deaf friend. This is my disabled friend. This is my so-and-so friend. And it felt horrible. It felt disgusting. Like, I would want you guys to think about that, where it's like, imagine you overheard someone talking about you at a party and they were like, the one with the dead dad, the gay one, the ADHD one. Like, we are human beings. We deserve more than this like one kind of flat description. The way that I've conceptualized it is that over-identification is, this is who I am and this is all I am, right? And then the other part of it is the subsummation part where this is all I will ever be. And that's, I think, a little bit of the harder part to contend with, because I know these characters are created by production and like editors, and like all of these people are vibrant and interesting and they're so much more than what they're giving us on TV. And I know that, again, it's so that they can create like a narrative and so they can create a good TV show. And I'm doing a series right now on the ethics of reality TV and all the crazy shit that's going on all these shows. But like, again, I just worry that it's creating these like static identities where the only thing that these producers now know how to do is trot out these narratives so that we can kind of latch onto them, outside of like actually creating a rich kind of textured experience that is the human experience. And sorry if that got esoteric and weird. I just kind of wanted to talk about it. I am open to all conversation in the comments. I know that this is like a big topic. It really kind of broke my heart to see all of these incredible dynamic women who have lived so much of their lives say, the little chyron underneath, widow, 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 widow. Like, people are so much more than their trauma. And I think it's lazy. I honestly do think it's lazy. And I don't want to watch TV shows about people like having these conversations over and over again. Like, once is fine, but I think in the second or third episode of your show, like Golden Bachelor second episode, Roni third episode, Drag Race every single episode, like some of the queens on Drag Race have survived incredible odds to get to where they are and become incredibly successful after the show. And it's kind of sad that like one of the main things that we remember about Alyssa or Roxy is like her mom left her at a bus stop. Like, that's brutal. And the producers coaxing these facts out of them to like get us to understand them, I don't think it works.
I really like him. I think this is a very educated, well-informed TikTok. And I found, the irony of him being like, I know people in the comments are going to take it this certain way. Just like another thing creators worry about is just like not it being taken out of context. So I thought that was like honestly really endearing. Like, he really just wants his point fucking heard. And I heard it loud and clear. And the biggest thing that I liked is he said, you know, this type of oversharing and trauma dumping in reality TV doesn't create a narrative arc. It just kind of hands us the person's worst experience and expects us to sympathize. And of course, on some level you do. But is this like a production shortcut? Like, it doesn't feel like that real raw human moment. And then when he talked about 15 years ago, you know, didn't talk like this, like, what is this, a culture thing, you know, having sort of this trauma dumping be the center of all of these, a lot of platforms and also reality TV. And I also really liked, so he was like, over identification, this is who I am and this is all I am. And then the subsummation, this is all I'll ever be. I really liked that. And it's just, you know, he said the only thing these producers know how to do is just like trot out these trauma narratives and like hope it sticks with people. And again, it does stick with people, but it doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel rich, like he said. And that's not the human experience. It's not like a polished, this is my trauma statement. So it's almost off-putting. And then lastly, what I'll say is, you know, people, you take example, The Bachelor. It's like the winner of The Bachelor was Kelsey. It's everyone says, oh, the one whose mom died. That's what everyone fucking says.
Everyone says, and they reduce her to that.
You know, she's such a wonderful person. And I really think she was one of the most genuine people on the show. Like, she was very much herself. And she was endearing and quirky and lovable. But it's like, that's what she came out with because, and that's on production. That's what they made her into. And, you know, arguable, you know what you're signing up for when you go for The Bachelor because that's how it works. That's how a lot of these shows work. That's all it is. So, you know, to some level, you're going to have to be trauma dumping a little bit.
Yeah. And I really like how you were saying, like, it, and he said too, like, how it's not earned because it feels like it's just like dumped on, like, literally trauma dumped. Like, it's this person and they're like encouraged to tell this story probably by production. And I was thinking, like, is this a new thing? Because I noticed, like, The Bachelor is doing it, like, more and more. But then I was also thinking, like, Queer Eye and what else did I write? Top Model, American Idol. Like, they always did that shit. And part of me thinks, like, on one side, it's, like, good in the sense of, like, you know, people can connect to these stories, especially if it's something about sexism or racism or something. But I'm wondering if they just do it like that to not be political or something. But it feels, like, very, like you said, like, flattening. Like, it's like this person just, and maybe if alcohol is involved, especially in these dating shows, it's like they're given a bunch of drinks on Love is Blind. We know that that is the case. And they're probably encouraged to share these, like, deeply personal things. And especially if it's a romantic dating show. But it's like, it can connect to the audience, but when it's not fleshed out and it's just like something you're dumping on the first date or just this person's introduced and, oh, my mom died, oh, I survived cancer, oh, whatever, it's just like, like, we're supposed to reduce people to this.
Yeah, and I think, you know, there's a difference between looking for someone's story and someone's trauma, you know, and that's what I really love about game shows is that sometimes that person's quote unquote story is actually a really positive thing. They founded this charity or whatever. And so I think that's way more, you know, easy to swallow or whatever. And it's not like we don't want to promote people talking about their trauma if they want to, but it does feel very like this wasn't this person's idea. Like, they were being encouraged because this is how the show is. So then it feels a little bit off, and I do think it hits different. You know, you have the American Idol or The Voice or all of these shows or Drag Race or Queer Eye, the ones that you said. Well, he talked about Drag Race, didn't he? He talked about Drag Race and The Golden Bachelor. Yeah. Which I'm not familiar with either. And Housewives. Yeah. I think it's different when it's a relationship reality show than, like, American Idol. I really do, because not only are you sitting in front of the camera telling it, but you're telling it directly to the partner or to whoever you're talking to on Love is Blind, like, whatever it is. So I think it does hit different and it makes it, like, a little bit more real. So I don't know. I mean, I personally, like, I do think reality TV is a guilty pleasure and that's all it really should be. unless you're talking about, a game show or something. Like, I love
But I
game
think that's an interesting thing because, like, more and more women have been talking about, and I used to hate, like, my parents would always be like, oh, reality TV's trash, blah, blah, blah. But, like, I do like it, and a lot of women are reclaiming it as a thing about, like, sociology and, like, people and psychology and relationships, because, like, it shows, like, a lot of the more human things that we're not given as much or are hard to portray in, like, narrative film.
It does.
But we also have to think about how heavily produced and encouraged certain behavior is for, like, views and people to be engaged and
it's
in.
like, but people, my argument against that is like, well, it's the same thing with a music artist, right? Depending on their team, people are always pushed to do that. They push Call Her Daddy to do that.
To exploit themselves.
So it's like, I'm not like, reality TV is so good, but I'm like, it's not much different than any other industry in the same that you said, it's exploitative. Like, that's what makes money, is exploitation, whether it's your fucking knowledge or your sex or whatever the fuck it is. So that's what I say to those people.
Yeah, and if we're seeing that, then I think it's only, like, it makes sense that it'll trickle down to social media and vice versa with all the personal stuff.
And no one's forced to go on reality TV either. People genuinely fucking want to. So it's like, it's not like the producers capture all these people. It's like they know what they're getting themselves into, or you should research any show that you ever want to be on. You need to research that and talk to people. Like, you cannot just go into things blind, because at the end of the day, it's not perfect, but no other industry is perfect. The film industry is not perfect in general. So it's difficult, but I do think as a viewer, reality TV has gotten very trauma washed, whatever you want to call it. And it's not hitting the way they want it to. And like he said, I mean, it does kind of give lazy. Like, that's all you got. Like, honestly, I would, on Love is Blind, I like to watch them joke around and be funny. Of course, you want to talk about things that are serious, like finances and kids and houses and jobs. And it's nice when they do have a moment that's deep, but it's like, I want more of the fun stuff too, when they're laughing.
Like the positive
things. And there's
things,
so much of that they don't put in the show, and we never get to see. And it's a lot. But again, if you're going to be on a reality show, I do feel like it's on you. You got a contract. You signed said contract.
And the thing with that too, that, because I want to talk about The Bachelor a little bit more, but like real quick, last thing on that, like, I feel like the difference in comparing it to social media is, like, people on social media are also, they know what they're doing to a point, and people are going to have backlash. I think the difference with reality TV in a way is that, like, even though you're going on it, you're going to be heavily edited and cut and produced and made to be maybe the villain or not, which can also happen on social media if you post your story. Someone's got to be the fucking villain. But it's like, it's so interesting. It's like two different ways of oversharing and trauma dumping that, like, we love to consume and we love to have as entertainment.
The Queer Ultimatum, like, as much as that was messy, and I don't know why a lot of those people were able to be on TV due to their psychology.
Yes.
Because I've read online that a bunch of people go on reality shows and you're supposed
to have a psych eval test. Like,
something like that, like I've read. And so it's like, I don't understand. I think it's very unsafe for some of those characters to be in that situation. However, I fucking loved that show.
Yeah.
And do I think it was good queer representation? Maybe, not really. But like, I do think a lot of it was more raw. And I do think, I don't know, but they were just as produced. So it's like, maybe I just fell for it because I love lesbians TV. So yeah.
Right. And we need representation and like all that shit too.
Right.
So it's
so it's hard. And it's the same thing with Queer Eye and Drag Race, you know?
Yeah.
People fucking
same
go
exact thing.
feral
and
for
it's like
Drag
same
Race.
with Drag Race. Like, I think like a lot of times like certain narratives are like, okay, like we want to see queens like that have like positive stories, and we want the culture to be that like they don't have this tragic history of abuse and bullying,
and that's why they got into this
and everything. But it's like, unfortunately, also a lot of times these stories are representative of the culture that we're in. So it's like, sometimes you can't avoid that to a point. And I think it is production's job, I think, to have more of that onion that he mentioned, like peeling it back more.
And it's hard because it's like, I feel like drag saves a lot of people in a way. But it's like, we don't want the same thing with sex workers. Like, every stripper is just like has no father and has been abused. Like that, as you know, maybe that is the story for a lot of people, but that's just the story for a lot of people anyways. And you don't want that. But it's also like, you know, if drag saved you from a bunch of stuff, it's like, that's real. And that is positive in a sense that this art form helped you. But I'm just rambling. Let's move on. Sorry.
Yeah, people want a hero and a storyline. But okay, let's get into a little bit more about trauma dumping and specifically The Bachelor. I think the guy, Tell the Bees, he probably would have talked about the latest season of The Bachelor had it come out, but I think this video was from before this season had come out because there was a lot of trauma dumping and a lot of people were talking about the trauma dumping specifically online. So do you want to read this Reddit thread?
Yeah, and this is about Joey's season, like last season.
Joey's season,
okay. Yeah, so this is The Bachelor, the official The Bachelor Reddit thread on trauma dumping. This person said, is it just me or is the level of trauma dumping out of control? I'm all for being vulnerable with someone you're dating, but I feel like people are confusing a partner with a therapist. It's not your partner's responsibility to fix you. IDK. I also know that they have a short time frame to share their stories. Maybe production encourages them to do it, but man, I don't think it looks fun at all being on The Bachelor. Therapists have proper training to know how to not take on the trauma they help others with. I feel bad for Joey, especially if he's a sensitive, empathetic guy. And then someone replied and said, the trauma dumping seems to be a part of the formula for the show now. It's definitely not something to do in IRL dating, but more for interesting/engaging TV. On one hand, it allows contestants to be more visible to viewers and sets them up for a cause to take up after they're an influencer. Jesus Christ.
I know, monetizing.
On the other hand, and sets them, like that sentence was crazy. On the other hand, I think it's great for them to show different issues that people go through that can be relatable, especially with the age of social media where you typically only see highlights, okay? And then this last person said, I fully agree. Honestly, if someone started dumping their trauma on me this early, I'd be the fuck out of there. Also depends on how they deliver it. Some of them have delivered info in a more informative way versus like, sob, feel bad for me, sob, which I think is much better. Everything you mentioned. I have a lot to say about this. Do you want me to start?
Go, just go.
So I think the general consensus, people do like that we're sharing things. They do like that there's being awareness, but the way it's being done doesn't feel right. But I do think the first mistake people are making is comparing The Bachelor to IRL dating. If someone said this to me, blah, blah. The Bachelor is a completely different universe that unless you're on The Bachelor, you do not know what it's like. And they don't have a lot of time. You get voted out.
One date,
And I think it's like
but is trauma a way to win them? Like,
right,
I don't know.
exactly. So it's like, I think with this show where they film for what? I don't even know, like 3 months, something so short.
Yeah.
And it's like they fall in love because they aren't just coming out the cut with like, hey, what's up? Nice to meet you. It's like they are being like, I want to have kids someday. I have a business, whatever.
We're moving fast.
So it seems crazy, but the show is crazy. You know what I mean? The show does it find love? Has it, yes, I guess people have found love from it, but it's not real. And
but are they trauma bonding?
Are they trauma bonding? And I extremely agree with feeling bad for Joey because that is a lot for one person to have to take in all these people's stories. Like, that is a lot. And I always think people think, oh, it's so hard for the girls. They have to watch him kiss. But I honestly think both roles are very hard because you do have to take in a lot. And I think it's just, I don't know. I wish the producers, I wish they would give people a little bit more freedom to kind of share if they wanted to. And I do understand there is an element of wanting good TV. But if someone's not, I think someone is good TV or they're not. And everyone has a story. It's just on you to figure out who it is. So I do think this all comes back to producers on set being lazy and kind of copying this blueprint from social media about all of that. And are they doing it wrong? completely? I don't know, because everyone is saying, yes, we want that to be shared, and the views are still high. I mean, this past season of The Bachelor, this is like, they finally started watching again. Like, it had been boring before.
And I think it had a lot to do with Joey.
A lot to do with Joey,
Also, I'm thinking, like, Rachel, she was in the the top three. But she was kicked off. She was kicked off because Joey was like, you haven't opened up to me enough. Like, I don't know enough about you. Like, Daisy had shared about her cochlear implant, and Kelsey had shared about her mother. Like, they had shared their traumas, but Rachel was kind of a little bit more guarded. She was like, I need a little bit more time.
She's
like,
a therapist.
She was moving more like natural, and it was like, no, that doesn't work here in this accelerated, crazy ass environment. So it's like, you're right. It is like very much, this is some crazy fantasy that's not at all like real life.
You have cameras on you 24/7. You cannot tell me that people don't act a little bit different. The only thing I think is once you get into a show and people get so used to the cameras, they let that down a little bit because you forget almost. It becomes like your reality. Because you can see that. Like, people are more tense when they get there because a lot of these people are not actors. They really are people.
First time.
And so it's just like, oh my God. So I don't know, but I think if people feel this strongly about these shows, it's like, don't watch anymore, because the more views and everything, they're not going to stop. They're not going to stop. And the reality is millions of people still want to go on the show, so they're not going to stop.
But I also think it's like, we should encourage it to be like a little bit better, don't you think? Like, because I'm like, I love it as a guilty pleasure, and I do think reality TV influences a lot of social media, and social media like vice versa. Like, I think it's like it's a loop. You feel me? But like, what I always think about, and I think about this a lot because we are specifically in sex, relationships, and personal identity. Like, we're choosing topics where we're researching heavily, like whatever. But most people, the only like content that they're getting about what a healthy relationship is, what dating is, what talking about trauma is via TikTok or The Bachelor. You know what I'm saying? Facts. So like, if these are our two top sources, the two most viewed things, like these conversations, like, I don't know how to get there, but I think it should be something the culture is talking about, to be like, oh, let's put, And
do you feel like, because I'm not an avid Bachelor watcher, which makes it hard. I did watch last season, or at least like, they honestly post like mad clips on YouTube. You could high-key watch like all the good parts, whatever. But I'm like, did the trauma dumping get worse? Like, for real, because I feel like it's always been like that.
Yeah.
But I think that social media does have a lot to do with why it has become the way it has. And it's crazy that Rachel got voted off for that, because she is trying to be representative real life dating, where it does take time to get close to someone. And it kind of, I don't know, it sucks.
Well, and that's the next part that I kind of want to bring it to. So, like, this is kind of an argument for the trauma dumping. And, like, Joey defended the trauma dumping as well. And I think one of the reasons that Joey was such a good bachelor was that he was so, like, emotionally intelligent and in tune and an active listener.
Bro.
And, like, he was, like, on point. And, like, I had only watched the last season before, which was Zach.
Charity season?
I hated him. No, she was the Bachelorette, but Zach before.
But she was on Zach's season?
She was on Zach's season, yeah. But, like, I did not like him. I don't think a lot of people didn't. Like, a lot of people watched this season because of Joey.
I know. And like, people loved him. And I'm like, at least they got that right, I guess. Because
they like, casted right with Joey.
Yeah.
But so this article kind of makes an argument like for the trauma dumping from Women's Health magazine. And it says, well, it's easy for viewers to accuse the contestants of trauma dumping on their dates with Joey. What they're actually witnessing is good communication, says Wright. We're seeing a cis man who can actually sit, listen, actively take in information, reflect, validate, and give empathy. He is doing what ideally would be the bare minimum in how we show up and listen in our relationships.
That's facts, though. That's facts.
It was.
Like, I'm not going to, like, die on that hill, but it is representation of a white cis male sitting down and listening. And is that sad that we need that? Yeah, but like I think that's why the bitches went so feral, because like, let's be honest, he wasn't that tall. Like, he was cute, but like, he wasn't like fucking some model type guy. Like, he was real and he was genuine. And it just shows that like men want certain things, but women really just want a man that will like actually hear them out.
Be attentive.
But it's also like he had to do that though. He was hired to not hired, but he was.
But I think he did genuinely.
I know, like he's daddy. Like I'm just trying to like critique, but like
he was. But I do want to say like bringing this kind of back a little bit to the beginning of the episode where we talk about like oversharing is so much gendered and often a thing that women do,
right?
And all of that.
Right.
Like I'm thinking about that in the context of The Bachelor. And like even all of this oversharing talk, like these are women, especially Lexi, I think. Like Lexi in The Bachelor, like her episode was like she needed to talk to him. She had to pull him aside, whatever, because her issue was that she had a time limit. She has endometriosis. She needed to have kids. She wanted to have kids on the clock because she didn't know if she could have them, which is a really real thing. And I feel like in the past that would be seen as like an overshare, trauma dump, women's issues, whatever, like a man's not going to pay attention to it.
Okay.
But like in this context, it's showing that, I don't know where I'm going with this completely, but like you kind of get what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's showing. Yes, I do. It's like taking that sort of like original stereotype and blending it into this. And I feel like people, when they do critique it, they don't realize the time limit. It's like she had a time limit to have kids, but they also have a time limit on the show. Like if you don't talk to him, like, are you going to stay? Like we don't know. Like he only has so much time. And what if he had felt a certain way about that? Like you want to nip it in the bud. You don't want to be on The Bachelor if it's not 1000% worth it for you. Yeah. But I don't know how I feel about it. I think like, at the end of the day, I do think it's a good thing that they talk about their stories and their trauma. I hope that they really want to. I mean, again, they did sign a contract and they were there, but at the same time, like it is like, I don't know, it opens for more backlash on them personally, and the show probably doesn't really give a fuck about that.
Yeah, because I'm like, because there was a lot of backlash on social media, particularly about the trauma dumping, but I'm like, is that misogynistic in a sense, like particularly with someone like Lexi, who it's like, if she is here for quote unquote the right reasons, wants love, whatever, and she's trauma dumping about her endometriosis, and people online are like, oh no, she shouldn't, like she kind of probably should, like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. It's like that conversation did in fact needed to be had. But
in the real world,
in the context of this, it feels
rushed and it feels flattened because they're on the clock and all these other things that are going on.
Yeah.
But people online are taking their like oversharing shouldn't be a thing to a different line. But anyway, so like back to the New York article, kind of more connecting to the TikTok that we watched too. It says at the very end of the article, the trauma plot flattens, distorts, reduces characters to symptoms, and in turn instructs and insists upon its moral authority. The solace of its implicity comes at no little cost. It disregards what we know and asks that we forget it too. Forget about the pleasures of not knowing, about the unscripted dimensions of suffering, about the odd angularities of personality. So like kind of speaking about like, oh, how Kelsey is reduced to just her mother. Like it is ignoring like everything else that made Joey fall in love with her. And like when we choose to leave that out and social media and reality TV, like whatever, we are leaving out a much bigger part of like the conversation in ways that we can connect with other people outside of just like this one deep, intense thing that happened to you.
I agree with that so much because I feel like the contestants of shows, like any dating show, there's so many conversations that go unseen on TV, and it just gives people the unwarranted right to make assumptions. But real quick too, I do want to say like, it does build relationships to share things. Yes. And, you know, maybe it's like, oh, I would never do that IRL. I need more time. But it's like, maybe it would be better if we got to the nitty gritty first without limerincing and then realizing we're not compatible. So I do feel both ways about it. I think like in the context of TV, it just brings up so many things. Like there's other factors at play in the experiment, but it's like in real life dating, it's like not trauma dump, I guess, but like it does feel closer if even if someone's like, oh, when I was little, like I had to go to the hospital, like I was in the ER, like my mom thought I was gonna die. It's like I don't know, like you just feel closer to them. That is a big part of their story. But in real life versus reality TV, you're also living out all the normal stuff of you like their laugh and how they only eat peanut butter on this type of bread and like whatever.
No, that and I
Not
think
a
that's
really
where
good
I was like you connected it because that's I think where I was trying to go with the Lexi thing, but I was kind of like losing my thought in the process.
Yeah, I
But,
think
like,
I got it.
Yeah, like it made me think of like a while ago, like I started seeing this guy that I had met in like a professional setting, and I like had a bunch of anxiety about like meeting up with him and like all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to my therapist because I'm like, I'm someone who has gone through like a very traumatic experience that I think has in a lot of ways like affected how I see the world, especially intimate relationships because it was an abusive relationship, all of that stuff.
Right.
And also since I met him in a corporate setting, like I have this other area of my life where I go by literally a different name, which is the podcast where we talk very openly about sex and relationships. And I was talking to my therapist about it because I was like, like I'm afraid to tell him like upon first meeting him, not like necessarily the nitty gritty of my trauma and my abusive relationship, but even touching on the podcast because like he's met like the part of me that I present to the world in a corporate setting, but not these other very, very important parts of my life. And in every relationship, I struggle with like how to address my trauma or when to, and because I do think it's important, but like it feels constantly, especially as a woman, that like, oh, I'm oversharing or I'm being too much or I'm putting too much on them and all of those things. But I agree, like you should, and my therapist said the same thing, like you should show up as your full self and not like wait until later down the line to be like, oh, and also by the way, like this is a whole side of me that you don't know.
Yeah.
And like I wonder, like just outside of like personal, because it's a lot, like I'm trying to tie it back to social media too, but because I'm like, I feel like it's a line with social media where it's like you don't have intimate relationships with everybody that follows you. But like, I feel like the way that I approach this podcast and sometimes talking about certain things, I'm like, I almost want to share as much as possible sometimes because I want to humanize myself. And I don't want to get like tied into the, oh, like these girls just do intellectual video essays or these girls just talk about dirty sex and like whatever. Like, no, I'm more than that. And like, it is duality in all of those things.
Right.
So it's like trying to bring more of like not every single part of you, but like what makes you a whole onion of a fucking person to social media, to a relationship, whatever, rather than flattening yourself to just
and
persona.
As what the TikTok and the article is saying, it's like within doing that, you're actually creating something way deeper and richer and like the actual human experience. And like you're alienating a lot of other people by focusing on that one thing because they could connect even more to like the full picture. And all that to say, it's like, I do think reality TV, social media, podcasts, like TV, it's all corrupt and there's a lot to say about it. But I do wish people would look at shows like Love is Blind and The Bachelor and be like, okay, this is not real life. It mimics real life and there is realness in it. Whereas they're not playing characters. They are being themselves. But it's not real life. It's a TV show. It's an entertainment. Do the producers want people to find love? I'm sure they do. But at the end of the day, they want a show with high ratings, something that's funny, sad, happy, maybe makes you angry, all of the above. Like we said, there always needs to be a villain. Why? Because it makes good TV. It gives that guilty pleasure-esque, like, I don't know. I know people, like, literally in their 70s, like, some of people in my family, and they, like, eat up Too Hot to Handle.
Yes.
Like, everyone just... It's a thing in our culture, and so it's all, just close it out with that.
So now I kind of want to move us away from reality TV and back into social media and TikTok. And I want to talk a little bit about the, like, I don't know if this is the right word. I was trying to figure out what the right word for it is, but like the regularization, I guess, of trauma dumping, particularly through TikTok trends, and also trauma as humor is kind of what we're going to get into next.
Nice.
So first, I want to start us off with the poll. Have you guys ever trauma dumped online? And 39% of you guys said yes, 46% said no, and 15% said maybe. And this is very vastly different than the oversharing poll, which was, I think, like 75% said yes. and then 15 no, or 25 no, and 0 for maybe. So I think trauma dumping, like, it has a much more negative connotation, and people are a little bit more confused by it.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever trauma dumped in full detail, but I've definitely done the trauma dumping humor angle on my Finsta specifically. Like, those captions were actually insane. But it's like, I never gave enough information for someone to, like, really understand. I gave you just enough to be like, oh my God, like, or something.
Yes.
Like, that's, but again, it was like a Finsta. And I do feel like, you know, maybe to an extent, I've maybe done it on this podcast talking about sex work and things like that. But again, it's always like kind of with humor. Like, I've never cried on here, which arguably some of the things I've said could have led to crying if it was in my personal life. But I feel like I don't go as deep because then I would maybe cry.
And I feel like here,
now.
like, because trauma dumping, I think I have the definition. Hold on, let me find it. Okay. Because I was going to bring it up later, but let me just bring it back here and then we'll mention it again later. But trauma dumping is the unfiltered sharing of strong emotions or upsetting experiences without the permission of the listener. So that is like a little bit iffy too, because like who's listening? Like when I think about like how we've maybe trauma dumped or talked about our trauma on the podcast, like it's usually very related to the topic at hand. And like I feel like we try to be conscious of not just not connecting it. But I feel you. Like, I definitely on Finsta, close friends have trauma dumped, like, try to relate it to humor or just be crazy. Like, I don't know. I think we've all probably, I've definitely trauma dumped in person to people, like, particularly when I got out of my crazy
me too.
relationship. Like, especially if there were substances involved and it's 6 a.m. at someone's house and we're all going around talking about our mothers and our bad relationships. Like, it's a trauma dumping cesspool. But I also, like, I've been on the other side of people trauma dumping on you, and it's very, like, uncomfortable.
Yeah. I feel like with meeting new friends, I've done it too, but it's kind of like, not like they do it first, but I assess the vibe. It's not like I just go up to someone, I'm like, boom. Like, I haven't done that. I don't think it's ever been unwarranted. I hope it hasn't been, or, like, they didn't want it, because that would be terrible. But I do think there is an element of it being part of the culture, because who wasn't trauma dumping on their Finstas, you know? Who wasn't posting crying pics?
It was our diary. Like,
yeah, like it really was. And it's like, I feel the same way about it. Like, it's building community. It's nice. But at the same time, it's like, I would never want someone to take that caption and be like, holy shit, and like change their thinking on me. But then again, it's like, so just don't follow it. You know, it's like no one's forcing you to follow my Finsta and read those captions. I haven't posted on it in like 4 or 3 years, but I'm just saying, like,
sometimes I want to bring it back. I'm like, that.
But bro, I thought about that, but I was like, I don't even post on my own Instagram. Like, I need to start there first, and then maybe I can bring it back.
I mean, it's easier on the Finsta, though. It's definitely fucking easier. But okay, so getting into a little bit about these TikTok trends with trauma dumping. The first one that I think was popular that I could find was the clapping. So I'm going to just play like a quick clip of this.
My uncle sat my ass at a family function. Yes!
My mom tried to kill herself in front of me.
Yeah!
My dad called me the other day so I can help him lie to his girlfriend. I was just like, I love when my dad calls me.
Yay!
My dad was drunk on the floor for Christmas dinner this year.
Yay!
My alcoholic stepdad throws beer on his children.
Yay! I can't go a day without smoking weed.
Yeah! My 7th grade teacher kicked me out for being too shy.
My ex-boyfriend used to threaten to kill me for texting him.
Yeah! My nephew caught my friend and I, and he thought there was a fire, and he told my mom.
Yeah! And then after that, or before that, the timeline is iffy. There was also this woman that went through the drive-thru and kind of trauma dumped to promote her memoir.
Okay.
I don't have a clip of that, but it was a thing, and then people started doing it as satire. And then now what is super fucking popular is the trauma candy salad, where 2 people bring a bowl and different types of candy and say their trauma and then pour it out. We've joked about wanting to do this, but here are some clips of that.
I'm Jess, and I got robbed at gunpoint walking home from a first date, and then the guy ghosted me. I'm
Alexa, and last month, the guy I was dating for 7 years hooked up with the girl he was telling me not to worry about for 3 months, 2 days after we broke up.
Hi, my name is Emily, and my ex-boyfriend told me a year and a half into dating me that he's not attracted to bigger women. And I brought the bull. Hi, my name is Kendall, and my ex-boyfriend texted me one day and said that he was going to kill himself, and then I had to leave school and to find him in a parking lot with a bottle of Tylenol PM. And I brought sour rainbow mini-filled straws.
My name's Abe, and when I was 15 years old, my brother called me and told me to come home to do chores, and I told him no, and came home like 2 hours later, and then I went and asked my dad where he was, and he said he was mad, and he went in the backyard, and so I went into the backyard to find out that he unalived himself. And I brought the jelly beans.
Hi, my name is Julie, and one time my therapist told me life wasn't made for everybody, and I brought the bowl.
Hi, I'm Shelby, and I got married and had 2 children with a man who was disabled and took care of him and nursed him back to health, and then he left me for his coworker, and I brought gummy clusters.
Okay, so these TikToks to me kind of fall into the category of like trending funny thing to do. Like everybody's hopping on board. It's cute, it's funny, it's comical. That's why I said at one point like we should do this. But I want to talk a little bit more about like dealing with trauma and trauma dumping like with humor, because a lot of people who suffer from trauma like use humor to cope. So do you want to read this article?
Yeah, let's do it. Trauma can lead to overcompensation through humor, intellectualization, or overachievement in a number of ways, says psychologist Nancy Irwin. Humor is actually one of the highest forms of defense mechanisms to cope with pain. Irwin would know. She's not only a psychologist, but she also used to be a comedian. The link between early pain and a sense of humor, however, was acknowledged long before psychologists like Irwin came along. The connection was first noted by ancient philosophers like Plato and Aristotle, who suspected that humor helped people build themselves back up after being knocked down. Later, philosophers like Kant and Kierkegaard built on that idea. They believed that the core of humor was a sense of incongruity, and a difficult childhood was incongruent with the joy and wonder of being a kid. Quick side note, the only reason I know how to pronounce Kierkegaard is because of the show The Good Place. If you guys know, you know. If you don't, you know. Anyways.
Okay, yes. But I thought this was like interesting because I feel like a lot of times people will be like their anxiety, their depression, like whatever makes them fucking funny. And like I've said this in the past, I feel that way. Yeah. And like certain things that like if you've been through trauma, like certain things you might find funny, other people will not think are funny. But like because you have, and then it's awkward. But like even hearing some of the things that people are trauma dumping in this candy salad trend, you're like, oh my God, but you're laughing because of the acts that they're doing while doing it.
Yeah.
And it's like, part of me is like, okay, it's normalizing it in the sense of like, wow, like there's so many humans that have been through so much shit and they're just regular ass people that can still joke about it and be fucking normal and hop on a TikTok trend. Like, that's the good side of it to me. Like, it humanizes people in the sense of, like, sometimes people just assume, like, oh, I've had it worse than fucking everybody. You know, like, sometimes we need to have, like, that reality
and
check
it's like a
type
white
shit.
man.
Yeah.
Maybe this is super pessimistic, but I really do feel like humans take something, like, that's good and then, like, make it bad, like, constantly. Because throughout this whole episode, it's like, the good thing is that we're sharing. It's building community. But just the way that it's done is like sometimes off-putting. I do think coping through trauma with humor is not a bad thing, though. I think it really, as long as you're also coping in other ways as well, and that's not like the only thing. But I don't think that's inherently bad. And I think no matter what the trauma is, a lot of people can relate to coping with their trauma through humor. So whether or not you relate to said candy person's trauma, you relate to laughing through it and just kind of getting through it. But I don't know.
Yeah, because I'm like, the fact that they are literally dumping the candy when they say this, it shows that they're like conscious of the fact that they're trauma dumping, which I feel like to me kind of takes you away from like the trauma dumping as an idea, because usually when someone's trauma dumping, like if you've ever been in person or someone is posting some like really dramatic, crazy shit online, you're kind of like, ugh, like cringe, like they're not self-aware in what they're doing right now, and that it's a little off-putting. Like this should be done in private, but like when they're doing it in this way that's like making it a joke, it's kind of like they're in on the joke.
They get it. Yep. And that's
So it's a
real.
little-
That is more human than the alternative.
Right. So I kind of like, similar to the Gen Z like aesthetic stuff, sometimes with certain TikTok trends, I'm like, we don't need to intellectualize it too much, because like maybe this could be like a good, cute thing, like funny, like we're coping, like we're relating, we're like, you know, we're conscious of it versus whatever. But I want to get a little bit more into the other side of things, which is kind of like trauma dumping to cope. And this article is from USA Today in the health and wellness section. And it says, people are making a salad out of candy in their trauma. What's going on?
The article says rituals like creating a candy salad with friends and sharing it on social media can be cathartic, says Alice Shepard, clinical psychologist and the owner of Murel Therapy Practice. It is similar to writing a letter to an ex or a parent who left and then reading it out loud and tearing it up. It is a way of processing grief and anger and saying, I am taking agency over something unsavory that happened to me and making it just a little bit sweeter and more bearable. That's so therapist right there, bro. And then this article from Vox, The Messy Art of Posting Through It, social media is our public diary and it's only getting more intimate, says Isabel Gerard, a senior lecturer in digital communication at the University of Sheffield, studies young people's experiences of social media and digital identities, says that when social platforms become a place to store meaningful memories, the way we post will only become more personal. Isabel says, I think a good chunk of content out there is genuinely people who want to use social media as an outlet to express their emotions, to share stories from their lives. There are lots of stories where social media has saved people's lives because people got access to communities where they feel seen and they feel heard and they can find people with common experiences. That's so true. A lot, in my humble opinion, a lot of people wouldn't admit this, but maybe they've created a throwaway account on Reddit and they've gone to a subreddit and they've shared the most harrowing, intimate, personal details about their lives because they need help and they get that support, because that's in a really bounded context. In a subreddit where it's supposed to be, it's not considered an overshare because the norms of that space dictate that it should be there. And then the interviewer said, so should we be posting through it? And Isabel said, on the flip side, you've got a lot of people who are putting their names and faces to a lot of different things. I saw this TikTok the other day of this girl whose partner had died. She was sobbing, and the first words that came out of her mouth were, I don't know why I'm doing this. I thought it was a really powerful sentence. We assume there's so much craft and thought that goes into these moments. A word that gets bandied around a lot is attention seeking. There's a lot of disparagement of people who do that. But like I said, social media has become so intimate as part of our lives. It is probably getting to a point in society where it does feel more normal and more natural to talk about how you feel and post it. There's a really simple explanation where you can say it might benefit someone else who is going through that. There's lots of evidence to suggest that it is the case, but it's helpful to destigmatize certain things and that it's really been helpful. But that to me is a simple explanation. What else is happening on top of that is that we are having, as a society, a very different level of intimacy towards social media that we might not be comfortable admitting at this stage. I don't think it's as easy anymore to just say that's an overshare or that's cringe. Damn, bitch. Like, you find these sources for real. Like, this is so good. I love that. I feel like I don't even know where to start. Maybe you should start.
Yeah, I feel like it's interesting because it's like kind of brings me to the idea of like, do you know why you're posting it? And I think a lot of people are like hopping on the trauma candy bowl salad or the clapping or the who the fuck did I marry or whatever, because it's like a trend and it's like, oh, everybody's doing it. I have something to say. Let me hop on it. And sometimes, like she said, this other creator or just regular person is like, I don't even know why I'm sharing this, but I just feel like compelled to. And maybe it's because they want to connect with other people, but maybe it's also because they aren't healed and they're looking to seek some sort of healing.
Yeah. And I think that's what it has to do with what I said at the very beginning about, is this oversharing, trauma dumping culture become almost subconscious?
Yeah.
And now it's like you need to have an active thought of, I'm not going to do that, because it's kind of the instinct to do that. And I think as a viewer, a consumer, someone on social media, you see all of these pages of people doing it, and you do see a lot of good reactions to it, and you're encouraged to do that as well. And I don't think it's a bad thing. Again, I think it's such a both and with this shit, because it is such a good thing to bring community, and especially if you're a queer creator. Like Shannon Beveridge is someone I followed for so long, and people really latched onto her, and she was representation at the time back in the 2000s, 2010s, whatever, that there really wasn't there. Like, she was a chapstick, you know, not femme lesbian, but she was a little bit girly. Like, she wore makeup. She had, you know, her hair done. Like, I don't know. And so I feel like it is so part of it. But I think the biggest difficulty with all of this is that I don't know of if making social media more intimate at the same time, while social media is such a monetizable thing, is good or bad. Like, I think it's good to be real, but I think sometimes the real and impactful sort of quote unquote trauma dumping gets overshadowed by the negative aspects of it.
Yeah.
And so people get clouded, but I don't know. I think this is like too much pressure. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think a lot of these questions are kind of
not from
unanswered
you,
because,
like just from the world.
just in general, because like we're in the middle of this culture, and like I think we're engaging in it, but we don't know how it's gonna pan out in 10 years, where we're gonna be from here.
Because
so it's
we are seeing it right now. Like, there's been no, like, I mean, I guess there are maybe some elderly influencers, but someone that came up as an influencer on TikTok when they were 21, like, none of them have, you know, died yet from old age. Like, they're just doing it literally right now. And that's why I get so heated when boomers talk about social media, because I'm like, you guys,
you don't know.
You literally, like, you guys wouldn't have been able to handle it type shit. Like,
and
this
it's
is
moved
crazy.
forward a lot of like social causes and a lot of like really good stuff. And it's had a lot of bad
guys.
It's had a lot, honestly, same. But it's had a lot of bad like mental health negative effects too. But like sometimes I feel like we focus too much on that and not enough on the other thing. Yeah. But I will say, like, all social media, unfortunately, once you post something, you may have an intention, but the other person receiving it, when you're not engaging in real life, there's always going to be a disconnect between how they're perceiving it as well. And like the other thing with that is, like, say someone posts their trauma, but it's not entertaining enough. Like, they're not going to get the same reaction as someone like Brooke Schofield, who's literally like a creator, and she's posting like, who the fuck did I marry? And it went like viral. Like, you know, so there's this like weird gap, and like it's entertaining, but it's also educating, but it's also connecting, and like all of this weird stuff.
I know. And I think like not the answer, but it's like for everyone to just be so much more open-minded and not even necessarily think critically about this, but just think about things from all different angles and don't take it too seriously. Like, and it's weird to have this paradox of someone being authentic online and talking about their trauma, but at the same time, as a social media consumer, we're taught not to take it that seriously. Just like I say, don't take Love is Blind too seriously, don't take The Bachelor too seriously, because it's curated. But then you do have this uprise of creators that are genuinely being themselves, like so authentic. So it's like, you should take that seriously, but not the other 80% of stuff. And it's all just so confusing. And it's like, we're in this doom scrolling. It's like, no one's thinking, we're scrolling, we're consuming. Yeah. Because that's what we've been taught, and subconsciously that's what we're doing.
Yeah, and maybe take it more seriously on the side of like, not seriously at like you're taking the content face value, like this is what it is, but think critically about the other sides of it, which I think you're right. We're doom scrolling. We're not stopping to pause about how this media is impacting us and anything beyond like the initial thought.
Because people consumed media in the old days. They actively went to get their mail and their newspaper sat down. I'm going to read about the world now. Now you wake up to your alarm at 8 a.m. Literally today, bro. I woke up. The first thing I saw on my Instagram was something about the election. Someone in the comments said something that was very hateful towards immigrants in this country. And I popped the fuck off. I was in the comment section at like whenever I woke up. It was, and it's like embarrassing. Like what I said was like honestly trash because I had just woken up. Yeah. And why did I feel the need to fucking comment? Like, and so it's like that sort of thing. It's just constant. You open TikTok, you don't know what the fuck is going to pop up first. It's a motherfucking surprise, bitch. Like I'm done. I'm like coming everywhere with words.
This brings us perfectly into the next part of things. So, like I said before, the definition, which I was going to talk about now, is trauma dumping is the unfiltered sharing of strong emotions or upsetting experiences without the permission from the listener. But now I want to get into a little bit more about the audience, which we're kind of talking about, that's consuming this content, less about the creator and more about the audience. So like Salem Tavar, very popular.
Which we've talked about in the Gen Z episode.
Yep, YouTube video essayist, and she has an essay called Trauma Dumping Culture on TikTok Has Gone Too Far. I will be completely real with you guys. No, I think she always does her makeup fly as fuck. I love her video essays. I think she does a great job compiling them. For some reason, I don't know what it is, but I commonly disagree with her. Yeah. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think we just see the world in different ways, but I think the way that she presents information is great.
And what I've learned is it's almost not disagreeing. I think it's expanding upon.
Building upon.
And I think that's what it is.
Yeah. She talks a lot about this trauma dumping culture on TikTok, and other things that she talks about was like people trauma dumping in the comments, like taking a wholesome moment of like, you want to date with your dad, like a nice little father-daughter day, and people are like, well, my dad died at the age of 6. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, people making it about them, which I didn't even want to get into in this episode. I cut it out.
That's like honestly like a pet peeve of mine. I hate that.
Like, shit. You don't gotta kill other people's like happy moment, like go to therapy. I don't know. But she talks a lot about like how these algorithms and being online is major emotional whiplash for people who are scrolling, because you're constantly exposed to this type of content, which again brings us into the conversation of like, do you have permission from the listener kind of thing? Mm-hmm. And she kind of says that it's non-consensual because they're dumping and the person who's on TikTok isn't like giving consent, I guess, in a way.
But that's TikTok's fault, not the person.
Right. So we'll get into it, but then she also says like people trivialize trauma and tell lies and then diagnose people online and all of that, which we kind of talked about before. I personally I've been like that before too, where I'm like, this isn't trauma, like grow the fuck up, but like it's fucked up.
And the diagnosis, we said at the beginning, like everyone has a degree in whatever subject it is. Right. That's like, very real and annoying.
Yeah, it's very like the therapy language on TikTok, blah, blah, blah. But she also talks like, this is the biggest part about it that I want to talk about. She talks about like blurring the lines between sadness as a normal human experience and depression, and also like this idea of mean world syndrome, where it's like when you're kind of focusing on your trauma and you're posting it and you're ending up in these algorithms, like you're just too much like the world is so mean and the world is so fucked up that you're not actually actively working on your mental health conditions and your PTSD and your trauma. You're just like focusing on the existence of it and how much space it's taking up in the world. And then also like she goes into, you know, people don't have any real friends, they're lonely, people are too individualistic, so like we're constantly online but we're not engaging with like real life people. And that we're identifying too much with our mental illnesses. So like, and she says, you know, love yourself and heal that shit, because it's not funny and it's not cute all the time. Like it's kind of cringe. And I do agree with her to a point, only because like I've healed. I used to feel very opposed to that. That would have offended me a lot in the past because of like what I've gone through and mental health. But like the place that I'm in now, because I think I'm more healed, I am a little bit more like no, I do believe it's someone's responsibility to put the work into healing their shit. And if they're constantly expelling it on other people and posting about it, like, it is exhausting, and like they need to get help because, like, you know, for yourself, like, you're not doing anything for yourself.
You've had journey,
right, and
like,
I know on the other side of it, it feels better to go get the help.
Right.
But like the part about her video that I'm a little bit iffy about is the whole consent thing and the whole like, do they not have the consent?
Before that,
yeah,
lack of third space. What is that again?
So that is like the whole idea that like we're a lonely culture. We don't have third spaces that we go to anymore. Like it used to be work, home, and then you have this third space.
Okay.
Like a community bar, restaurant, whatever, where you meet up with your friends.
Like in How
because
I
you
Met
had
Your
to.
Mother. Yeah.
Yeah, and like
Okay.
friends and all of that stuff. Like now it's just social media.
Okay, but
or like
consent.
bars and stuff. But
Yeah.
like back to the consent stuff, because like I see, and I think this rhetoric is the same issue that I have with the Gen Z aesthetic stuff and a lot of stuff with social media. Like we constantly want to blame the people that are posting, and we want to blame the social media platform, but we don't want to take accountability. And I don't, not to like completely excuse them, but I don't think we want to take accountability within ourselves sometimes to manage how we are engaging with content and how much we're online.
Yeah. Yeah.
With like media literacy, all of those things. So like, I'm like, if you're on TikTok and you're scrolling, and it gets iffy because if we talk about videos that are like, there's fucked up shit that's on there. Like I'm thinking of Sally, not Sally Massey, Sonia Massey, like the woman that was just shot by the police. Like very, very terrible story. Like I saw the video on Twitter and I watched part of it and was like, I cannot see this. Like this is trauma and I don't want to see it. I think it's important that people know the story.
Yeah.
But like, I do think like it's a little bit different when you get into violence and stuff like that. But like at a point, it's like when you're scrolling, like you can scroll away and you kind of like need to like.
I totally hear you too, because is social media addictive? Yes.
Yes.
However, there's also a lot of other things that are addictive. And if you're
Cigarettes.
someone that literally can't go a day without TikTok, you're going to lose your mind. Like, I'll be the one to tell you, like, you need help. Like, do they make things intentionally addictive? Yes. But to a degree, you still do have control.
Yeah.
And I think the social media companies do a lot wrong. As you said, I don't want them to just, but, you know, to a degree, it's like if you know TikTok is actively hurting you and you're still choosing to go on, that's a reason to seek help and have conversations with people about that. Because I don't know, like maybe it's something that I do is like I'm really quick to mute people, unfollow. I don't give a fuck because this is once you realize how much is just like you're taking in this energy of content, like you need to just prioritize what you're watching. And yes, you open an app, you can't control what pops up, but you can control the next step from there at the end of the day. But I also think that, you know, this is a new thing and people don't know how to deal with it. There's never been a social media type of addiction before.
Yes.
So people aren't going to just be like, oh, it's just like cigarettes. It's like alcohol. They're not going to think that because it sounds ridiculous. But like
that, it
like is a thing. And yes.
Yeah, no, you literally like took the words out of my mouth because that's
Great.
what I was exactly about to say. Because I'm like, we have
Cool,
AA,
bro.
we have rehab for like, we have nicotine patches, we have all these
That's
things because
crazy
they've existed.
yeah.
But like, I know that's exactly what I was thinking, and I'm like, should there be some sort of rehab for social media addiction? Like, yes, definitely, probably. But even before that, like when we talk about sex and all there needs to be education about how
media
to
literacy.
handle media literacy and how to engage with content. Like that needs to be a fucking class.
But
in
people
middle
are
school.
like, it's still so new. People are fucking slow. Like there hasn't been enough time. Like I guarantee you, like within the decade or like whatever the fuck, like there's got to be something. Like there's more college classes about digital things, but I think things change so rapidly. It's like impossible right now to like set people up. And I think like if we ever become parents one day, like we are gonna have, just like
you're gonna sit.
You like sit your kid down to like talk about sex, like whatever that's like stereotype thing that, you know, you definitely should do that. But it's gonna be like social media, and it's not gonna be like, you know, don't send nudes, because that's what I got. And bitch, I sent nudes. And
it's whatever. It's not helping.
So it's
that's
gonna
just the
be,
baseline.
Yeah, that's just misogyny. Also, I don't know, like.
Yeah,
maybe.
but it's gonna get. I'm thinking like it's scary, and I don't want to get into like, you know, apocalypse scary shit. But it's also like
let's
AI.
get into apocalypse.
AI shit is taking off at a whole nother level with like content, with deep fakes, with voices, with all of this shit, that it's getting beyond a point that it's even recognizable to what's real and what's fake, and all
the
of that
general
shit
public doesn't know that. You don't think about AI besides Alexa and ChatGPT. You don't think about that, bro. That fucking Instagram thing you DM'd me about the robot that ended its life.
The one that killed themselves
because he was, or they were so overworked. That robot, like, I'm sorry, but that broke me. Are you serious? The machinery.
I'm like, they're conscious. It's conscious by like.
That's like giving like your okay, I'm not gonna say slavery.
No, but like
okay, yeah,
it is, because I'm like, are we colonizing a new different form of artificial intelligence? Like, think about every fucking apocalyptic robot movie. Like, it's happening.
They're all so good.
But it's like even more the case with all of this stuff coming. Like, we don't even know how to engage properly with content and media that's coming from other human beings, let alone when we bring in artificial intelligence. Like, we're setting some shit up to completely manipulate our minds.
Honestly,
like, there needs to be education.
I want to be a mom for real, but like part of me is like, we should just like move to an island and like we can just like get lit forever. Like, why do we need to like
engage in the greater society? Like, bro, I feel like that's what the rich people are doing when they move to fucking Mars. But anyway, I want to bring us next into this kind of final section a little bit. But we have Brene Brown. She writes a lot about vulnerability.
Yep.
And this is an article.
She really helped me in my eating disorder recovery.
She's helped me a lot too with like relationships and opening up, and like she's just great, guys. If you haven't heard of her, definitely check her out.
And this article is about vulnerability versus oversharing. So it says, as Brene Brown writes in her book, Daring Greatly, How the Courage to be Vulnerable Transforms the Way We Live, Love, Parent, and Lead. She says, oversharing is not vulnerability. In fact, it often results in disconnection, distrust, and disengagement. And I understand why. I don't enjoy being on the receiving end of oversharing either. I want to empathize when people tell me about challenging and difficult experiences they've had. When the motivation for sharing isn't clear or seems incongruous within our relationship, I find it hard to do that. And so is this kind of using oversharing in that definition of trauma dumping, where it's like it didn't want to be received, it wasn't warranted? Because otherwise I disagree.
Yes, so I'm kind of thinking about this more in the context of social media. So like when someone's posting and their motivation for posting is unclear, or if the receiver, the audience, is not doing the work, media literacy, to figure out or engage with this media properly, it's creating a like, it feels like too much, and it's also like the creator is not landing with the audience, and the audience is not interpreting it correctly because there's not like a real relationship going on back and forth. So it's doing kind of
more harm than good.
So it's doing more harm than good. So to that, I'm like, but it also brings up the question, is it on the creator to always explicitly say what their intention is?
That's what I was going to say.
Or is it the audience to figure out what the intention is and to digest the media?
I think it's like, if you're a creator and you're consistently making content that isn't resonating with the audience and you actively see it doing harm, I do think it's on you to slightly redirection. If what you're doing isn't problematic, though, you know, it's also like, keep going and maybe you'll find your audience.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think it's like, because creators do have a lot of responsibility, but
Yeah.
when people misconstrue things, like, that's not on them. Like, that's on people trying to crack the code and, like, pretending they know people when they really don't. Like,
Yeah.
I've done that with people that I like before. Like,
Yeah.
unfortunately. And I'm like, so that's not good. But I don't know. I think creators should, you know, if we're calling this art, comparing it to Charles Dickens, it's like you should be able to do that. But it depends on the intentions. Like, if you're maliciously doing this type of content, you see the comment section and being crazy and you continue to do it as rage bait, it's like, that's a different thing. But also, it's like, freedom of speech, like, social media is like anyone can post. Like, maybe it's just on them. It's like, we'll stop watching, unfollow, block. Like, there are ways to, like, really not see someone anymore. Like, blocking is, like, incredible. Imagine they didn't have that shit. Like, people would be doing way more social media cleanses than they already do.
Yeah.
That's another thing. It's like, you got to teach your kids about social media cleanses to, like, do that. You know, it's like no one knows that you should, or yeah. So, and it's also on people on what they comment, because those comment sections get crazy. And that's not on the creator. They didn't ask for that type of comments. Like, if that's what happened, that's what happened. And sometimes people do ask for that, the rage baity stuff, and they want that attention. But it's like, someone really could put something out there that was harmless, and people are just like psycho. And like, that's on the audience. Like, why are you commenting?
Well, that makes me think of, like, Brooke Schofield and her, like, Who the Fuck Did I Marry series about Clinton Kane.
Yeah.
And she has this, like, army where she's arguably or not weaponizing her audience against him.
Right.
You know, because it's bringing up this conversation of, like, these things are not okay in a relationship. It is manipulative. Yeah. It's toxic to lie to a person. Women can relate to that. This is fucked up. But at the same time, her entire audience that very much loves her, can relate, whatever, is now going to comment on his shit and hating on him and create, like, so it's,
but
like,
it's like
weird.
She didn't, unless she's
is it her
telling
fault?
them to do that. Like, why is that the culture? Like, if that's the crack the code culture is fucking, why do people
but is it,
do
I
that?
feel like at a point, is it, because I want to be like, is it the creator's responsibility to say don't do that? But then you look at someone like Risa Tisa, who was like, don't go find
And
my
Baby
ex-husband,
Reindeer.
and they do.
Right.
So it's
that's
like,
what I'm saying. I'm like, and they could argue, well, if you know people are going to do that, then don't put out that art. Don't give them anything so they can't do that. But it's like, I refuse to believe that that's the answer, because that doesn't feel right to me.
Because then you're censoring.
You're silencing, you're censoring. Like, it's like wanting to have that safe space, but this crack the cold culture is like ruining that shit, you know? And some people are rage baity. They're so happy you find them. Like, they are. But, and then it's like, okay, but like with Baby Reindeer, we're talking about abuse here. We're talking about things that are so fucking serious, and y'all are going to take that crack the cold culture. Like, who gives a fuck? But I thought this was here to create community and feel things, and you're ruining it. Sir.
And people are always gonna do that. Like, we can't prevent it, and it's because it's like real life culture playing out in the media, and
no one knows what to do.
No one knows what the fuck to do.
Hey guys, it's Autumn. Unfortunately, if you're watching the video version right now, my part of the video for this section did get lost in the matrix. So we did just put a photo of me in there. I'm sorry about the jump scare. So yeah, if you're watching video, my video will end up coming back towards the end. But as of right now, it'll just be a photo of me. Okay, back to the episode.
So lastly, I kind of want to end us with these polls that we asked you guys, our audience on Instagram, before, of course, we went through this fucking 3-hour saga of this episode. But I think it gets it gives a good context to maybe what the greater population is thinking about these things before, like, doing the research.
Yep.
So, yeah.
So we asked you guys, how do you feel about seeing trauma dump / oversharing content? 77% said it depends on what it is / who it's coming from. 13% said it's a guilty pleasure, and 10% said I hate seeing it. And I feel like I do agree with it depends on what it is, who it's coming from, and like bringing us back to the beginning when we read that article about, well, was it bad or were you just not the right listener for said content, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and what's the intention? How well do you know this person? Is it sticking with what you care about? Like all of those things. Yeah, I think
etc.
And more people like we want to say, oh, everybody's put off by it, but I think that's less of the case. It was the least amount of people that hate seeing it all together. Like
yeah, like literally that was probably like 2 or 3 people.
Right.
And then the last question we asked y'all was, why do you think people trauma dump / overshare online? And 37% said it's a cry for help. 33% said it's to educate or connect with others. 17% said to be funny and entertain. And then 13% said go viral, hop on a trend. And I honestly think it's all of those things.
All of them.
It depends on who it is. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think it's
it definitely depends. It depends on who it is. It depends on the style in which they're posting it, the time, the context, like all of that. I think
all of that.
Definitely. It's case by case, guys. And that's why all this shit is so fucking hard.
Yeah.
But yeah, I want to kind of wrap us up and maybe talk about these questions along with everything the fuck else and what's got us so wet, so dry, and so confused about the topic. Because guys, like we said earlier, we are engaging with this shit in real time as it is going on. Things could change. This episode is coming out, I think, 4 weeks from when we're recording it now. So like things could change in the meantime.
Right.
Like we don't know. So we never want to say anything in stone. But like we want to like engage with it as it's happening. So like a couple of questions that I want us to think about is, are we responsible for our own algorithms? Should healing and coping with trauma always be kept private? Is trauma dumping unhealthy overall? And why are we all trauma dumping? So you want to kick us off?
Questions. I love those questions. I mean, are we responsible for our own algorithms is super tea, because at the end of the day, those algorithms are generated by what you search and what you consume and like the things you say, which is super creepy, but like a lot of times it is accurate. But I do think overall, yes, we're choosing to engage in social media, but again, it's such a brand new thing that it's like we didn't even know that we were making that choice about our algorithm. Like it's all just happening so quick, but I don't know. I am definitely wet that like there is more spaces online to talk about things, because saying we didn't used to talk about trauma 15 years ago isn't necessarily like a good thing, you know? Like we should talk about those things, but like I said, the pessimism in me is like humans love to do something right, but then take 5 steps backwards right after that, because I do think I don't think trauma and trend should ever be in the same sentence. But in the same way, it's like the trauma candy. Like, I do think it's fun to relate over humor and make it seem not so serious, because there's trauma dumping where there's a lot of crying and explicit, detailed storytelling. And then there's trauma dumping literally in a candy bowl, but it's funny and it's a trend. So it kind of makes it feel not so serious, but it is serious. So I don't know. It's all very confusing, but overall, like, I am wet that there are spaces like that, and there definitely are creators that have shared trauma, that have changed people's lives, that have watched and listened and grown with them. So I'm wet about all of that, and that the space is at least there now where it was non-existent before. And the last thing is, why are we trauma dumping? I want to say, like, I feel like the subconscious need to overshare is becoming a lot real. Like, you talk about adaptation. Like, I don't know if I'm reaching and I'm drunk, but I feel like we're sort of adapting to be more comfortable with doing that. Yeah. And I do think you should be comfortable talking about your trauma, but it gets tricky with the whole definition, because trauma dumping is when people don't want it. And I don't feel like I've really been talking about it like that, because I don't think not everyone thinks about it like that. It's a more loose definition. But I'm wet that we're at least talking about it and creating those spaces. Passing the mic to you, Fiji.
Yeah, just going on with that last part that you said. I'm like,
yeah, I'm like,
it's so like, No, but it's so like us in this podcast, I feel like, to connect everything to fucking everything. But I'm like, part of me now, when you were just saying that, I'm thinking like, yes, social media makes us like overshare because we have that access, and like therapy is more like, is it maybe oversaturated and like muddled down or I don't know what the right word, it's escaping me right now. Again, I'm kind of lit. But also when you think about like access to healthcare, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, not everyone has access to a fucking therapist. Like, I work a corporate job that pays me very well. Like, I can afford I wouldn't say very well, but I'm able to afford my rent, my mortgage, and like my lifestyle and all of those things. And I had to cut back from like my mom's health insurance, who was a teacher, to my health insurance that I can only afford one therapy session a month. Most people cannot afford therapy at all, and so they are left to their own devices and advice from other people on platforms. So like that is also coming into the mix when we're talking about how we're coping with all of these things. So I think that's important, like classism, all of those things, like we have to take into account as well.
Yeah, therapy is a privilege, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
But
it's so fucked, but it is. But like, I also do agree, like, we've come so far in a lot of ways, and I don't want to like get caught up in that like mean world syndrome that Salem had talked about, because like I think it's important to also like, you know, be like, we've come a long way and we should be happy about that, but not just be like, oh, like racism's over, like that type of conversation. Be like, we still need to build.
Yeah.
But I do think like us just being able to recognize like how trauma impacts a person, like how relationships are misogynistic, how this is unhealthy, how this is toxic, this is abusive, all of those conversations, recognizing people have diverse experiences, all of that, like the humanizing factor of it, I think is like so wet.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited about that. So like I would say that's like the best thing out of all of this.
Yeah. And for dry, and going off the discussion question, should our healing coping with trauma be kept private? Like, I'm dry about that question because I feel like it's not the ask that it should go away, because the biggest, wettest part of it is that everyone was like, there's community and we can relate to each other.
Wettest part. I love that.
Bro. And I'm like, but it's not like, oh no, they shouldn't be doing it, this is an ick, that's horrible. I don't agree with that language. But I think that it's when people embellish things and exploit their traumas for money is when it gets a little bit more dicey. But I don't think the answer is to keep it private. And I am dry about the people that think like it's all just an ick and no one should trauma dump, because at the end of the day, it is better than nothing. Because there has been a lot. And like I said, even just one positive comment in a sea of hate, like, does mean something. Yeah. Because that is one person that resonated with it and makes the creator not feel as alone. But then going off of that again, like, I am dry about the addictiveness of it all, and that social media is addictive within itself, but also the creator might become addicted to doing said trauma dumping, the viewers becoming addicted to watching trauma dumping. That's where it gets dry, because that's when it's just like, again, it should be something good, but unfortunately this is also new and no one knows their limits really yet. And people are learning. You can see your screen time and your app usage on your iPhone, which I think is really great, and you should look at that. So yes, I'm just dry about that whole sort of thing.
I'm definitely dry about the same question, like, should our healing coping with trauma be kept private? Because, like, it's a difficult question, and I feel like my impulse is to be like, no, it shouldn't, because so much of these conversations, unfortunately, because it's not happening in our education, like, so many of these types of things, I think, are left to families and parents to deal with their kids. But because we're all raised differently, and because some people don't have parents, like, those types of emotional issues aren't covered. But when the education's not there and it's left to their homes, like, and people don't have therapy, like, all of these things are working against you, where you are not fully able, you don't have the tools to solve it in private. And so you're obviously going to look to other people, and that's where we get podcasts, influencers, all of these things. But again, it's so overwhelming, and how do you even engage with that when you don't have the tools to do that? So, like, I'm very dry about this, like, paradox of, like, it again, unfortunately, comes down to like the capitalism of it all and the access to all of the education tools, money, everything required to be like a fully functioning, healthy fucking human being. That's like the biggest draw. I feel like everything else I kind of want to save for Confused.
Yeah, and I feel like for Confused, it's like we talk about influencers and it's almost like it feels silly. Like a lot of people that are in the influencing space prefer this new language of content creator because influencer kind of got a bad rep for a while. But you really are influencing. And it's like I'm confused about that sort of responsibility with content creators. And you don't need to have a background check to be a content creator. You don't need to be a good person to be one. So it's like you're really giving everyone a platform to just do whatever they want. Anyone could try to grow a platform, but there is this responsibility on you to, you know, knowing that if you have a lot of followers and you're going to influence someone a certain way, it's like you should be intentional about that and know that there could be consequences and people could get hurt. Because as much as you might think you're doing satire, silly, trauma dump content, there's people with real lives and real experiences watching that. So it is sort of your responsibility to like move the culture in a better direction. But at the same time, like it's like no one's teaching you how to do that. And no one's like, we're kind of now uncovering how serious everything can be. Because at first it's just like silly TikTok videos, and sometimes it is, but it's like TikTokers make mainstream news. Like shit, like trends are like real for people, and it's like it really is a culture shifter. So I don't know, I'm just confused about the responsibility of it all, of content creators versus the responsibility of said viewer. I think that's a huge conversation and a really important conversation.
Yeah.
And I think it's not a conversation that's had a lot because everything is just happening so quickly.
Yeah, everything that you said, like I 100% agree with. So I'm gonna put that into my Confused as well.
Yeah.
And then just also other things like coming from being creators ourselves, like the thing that Alex Cooper was talking about and a lot of what's happened with Tana Mongeau, like I'm a little bit confused about like how the journey of being a creator and like being in the public, or any person really who's like creating content online and maybe isn't big enough yet.
Yeah.
But like what to talk about or quote unquote exploit or share to educate and all of those things and what not to. And I feel like I keep coming back to like, you know, the person has to be healed and like you're never going to be fully healed. So like continue to do it on the journey, because sometimes I psych myself out and I'll be like, oh, I can't share this. Oh, I can't talk about this. But then when I really think about it, I'm like, no, it's important for me to.
Yeah.
Like maybe in a month or 2 months, I will feel so differently. In 5 years, I'll probably look back at certain things I said on this podcast and fucking hate myself for it. But also like, that's who I was at that time.
That's
and
okay.
We
need to humanize it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like a little bit like confused about, I guess, that humanization part of the whole conversation, the onion idea of like a person being minimized down to one piece of content.
Yeah.
Even being a creator, all of those things, like we
Their
can't.
trauma.
Yeah, like does content, does art, does storytelling, all of those things need to be more and more like real life? Like when we lack media literacy and the maths and sciences are kind of elevated against the creative shit, it's like people aren't given the tools to like infer and look between the lines and like pay attention to psychology and sociology and like all of that type of shit. So like our culture is not set up for success.
Yeah.
It's such a big fucking conversation.
You're
but
so
yeah.
smart, babe. You really are.
Thank you.
So proud of you. I'm like, it's really crazy. But again, if we didn't have this platform and the drive to kind of unpack these things, like, you know, I would think differently. You know, like I said, it's doom scrolling. Like no one's thinking critically about it unless they feel like they really need to, they should, or whatever the reason. But let us know what you guys got out of this whole conversation, what you think about all of the things that we shared and said about oversharing, trauma dumping, everything. We would love if you could subscribe or follow depending on the platform. If you're on YouTube, definitely give this video a like and comment something. Even if it's just a couple of words, it means so much and it really helps us. give us a star rating on Spotify or Amazon or Apple or any of those things. And genuinely, if you're still listening right now, we love you. And we love you only if you listen for 30 minutes. It's chill. But definitely follow us on Instagram as well. We're at So Wet So Dry. The O's are zeros. Again, we post polls every single week for said upcoming future episodes. And yeah, thanks for listening.
Yes, and whatever platform you guys are on, we're also on a ton of other ones. So if you guys are listening on YouTube, but you listen to a lot of Spotify podcasts or Apple Music, whatever, make sure you find us there where you can follow us and see weekly episodes. We also do have listener support on Spotify. It's 99 cents, $4.99, or $9.99 a month. It is in a link in the bottom of the description of every single episode, no matter where you guys are listening. It is the only way for you guys to financially support us for the content that we do create, if you guys fuck with it. We're not making any money from this right now. We just genuinely love doing this, but we would love to make it a career in the future. So shout out to our beginning audience. You guys are so important to us, and definitely let us know what you guys thought, because we want to keep building on this fucking conversation.
Yeah.
So we love you so fucking much, and we will catch you in the next episode. Bye.
Bye.
All right, guys, 2024 is the year of the lesbian, and I'm going to tell you why. So I woke up the other night and I had this in my notes app, and I have a habit of just like writing random shit down when I have insomnia, like no explanation. But I saw this and I'm like, this has legs. Lesbians have been dominating mainstream pop culture this year, and I just feel fed, just a constant buffet of new tidbits. Here's our recap so far. First, obviously we have lunch. I have been manifesting Billie Eilish to come out for years now. Not only did she do that this year, not only did she have that Rolling Stone interview, we got this song. I forget who I am when the song is playing. I almost rear-ended a car yesterday hearing a new lyric. We got the OG L-Word cast coming out at Coachella, which actually caused one of my straight friends to actually watch the show, which ultimately leads me to Renee Rapp and Chappell Roan. Love Lies Bleeding. Kristen Stewart was also one I wanted to come out for years, and now she's having that, the bathroom scene. This is the first time I've seen these adorable prom videos. I forget the name of the show, but holy shit. I don't love the last one, but she has representation.